We're back. Yes, we're back. Welcome, everybody, to the Committee of the Whole, September 12th, 2023. Our deputy, I was going to say she was our deputy CAO, but she is our deputy mayor, but, you know, take it, is going to read the
Deputy
acknowledgement. Deputy mayor, who just got back on more than a red eye last night.
More than a red eye.
Whatever 3:30 in the morning is, so. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. We would like to acknowledge that we are meeting here today in Kisiputwik, one of the 7 districts of Mi'kma'ki, homeland of the Mi'kmaq people. We acknowledge the treaties of peace and friendship, and we thank the Mi'kmaq people for their generosity in sharing their homeland with us. We are all treaty people.
Thank you. And a motion to approve the agenda, please. And I will have 2 things to add to the motion.
Okay. I would move that the agenda be approved as circulated and or amended.
And Councillor Elliott will second it. I want to add, we have a proclamation and also introducing a new staff before we move on to the minutes. So if we can add those 2, and Councillor Elliott has seconded that. Are you still okay? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That's passed. We normally we don't do proclamations at Committee of the Whole, but this is for the month of September, so we wanted to proclaim the Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder (FASD) Awareness Month of September 2023. We've done this each year, and this is on our the town's Facebook site and also posted at the front. So, and the reason we're doing it is because September, and by the time we get to council, it will be September will almost be over. And the other thing I would like to do, gives me great pleasure to introduce Jamie Harvey. Jamie replaces Garth as our operation mechanic at the fire hall. And Jamie, if you could maybe say hi and maybe tell us a bit about yourself.
Jamie Harvey, I actually live in Windsor. I've been engaged for 24 years, but been a part of the local fire department for 15-ish years as a weekend member, so quite full of earth, but going on over there. So looking forward to the opportunity.
Good. Well, welcome. Happy to have you, and hope you're right at home here. Okay, so we have 2 sets of minutes. First is minutes of Committee of the Whole for July 4th, 2023.
Okay. I would move that the minutes of July 4th, 2023 Committee of the Whole meeting be approved as circulated and or amended.
Do I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Butler, are there any errors or omissions or changes? No. Seeing, hearing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes as received, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Those are passed. And Committee of the Whole in-camera minutes for July 4th, 2023.
I would move that the July 4th, 2023 Committee of the Whole in-camera meetings be approved as circulated and or amended.
Thank you. And a seconder, please. Councillor Palmer, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Those are passed. Now, we have 3 presentations today. We were going to have 4, but the 4th group, just to update you, was to be a group looking to establish a tennis club facility. And last night, the Council of Kentville unanimously approved a location there. So they have pulled out of presentation, but there will be, it appears, a tennis facility in our area. So that's great news. So I'm going to ask each presenter if you could try and keep your presentation to 10 minutes or less. That will give council an opportunity to ask questions. And sometimes our presentations, and perhaps some of these presentations, will be for information only. I suspect that's not the case for all these. So after council's asked their question, I will ask, what's your pleasure? And so we may move it on to budget, which will start in earnest next month for budget discussion, not just for discussion at that stage, or there may be something else appropriate, and our CAO, as we get to that point, if we're struggling with what we might do with that, can give us some support on the wording. So that's a little bit of a change from what we do, but I think in this case, it's appropriate. So it gives me great pleasure to, our first presenter is Dr. Alison Wellwood. I think probably many of us in the room know Dr. Wellwood. This has been this is an exciting project. I would note that the CAO and Councillor McKay and I have been part of some of these discussions, just for full disclosure, and some trips not completed to look at some collaborative healthcare systems in the province. So with that intro, Dr. Wellwood, take it away.
Thank you very much, Mayor Donovan, and thank you to Council for inviting me here, and CAO Bowden and Mayor Donovan. So I'm Alison Wellwood. I'm a family physician here in town, and I'm a longtime Wolfville resident. I grew up here in town, and it's my pleasure to be here to speak with you today. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay? Yeah, great. So the issue I'm bringing forward here for discussion is looking forward at our primary healthcare situation here in Wolfville, and how can we plan as Wolfville grows for a sustainable primary care system in our community. So looking at the situation in the province, which I'm sure many people are familiar with, there are roughly 150,000 Nova Scotians who are looking for a family physician right now. That's the stats as of July 1st. And our region in the western zone of the province is one of the most unattached, ranging from 11 to 26% of Nova Scotians who are looking for a family physician. So one scary fact is that many family doctors are also aging, and they're moving into retirement. 1 in 4 family doctors is over 65. And Wolfville, we know, is projected to grow. We're a growing, thriving community, and I think that's fantastic. But I also fear, the situation and thinking about having accessible care for all of our community members moving forward as a family doctor and as a community member. And we think about the kinds of services that doctors provide, staffing the hospital and doing all the various roles there, basic primary care, which we know is the foundation of our healthcare system, palliative care, end-of-life care, reaching out to special communities, the nursing home residents, large communities, et cetera, et cetera. So we all know we need medical care, and we want it to be accessible for all. But we're losing doctors here in town. I think many of the councillors and community members are aware that we lost the Mud Creek group of family doctors a couple years ago. And a number of doctors, a couple in our group, have also migrated over to the New Minas community. Now, sometimes Wolfville residents will still travel to see their doctors there, but when we lose that nidus of pull of a family physician group in our town, we really will have trouble recruiting. And this is my main point today, and I'll illustrate that. So Nova Scotia Health recruiters, actually, when they're entertaining doctors who are visiting the area now, no longer offer Wolfville as an option. And this is because virtually all new doctors are looking to join a team, and our team simply has no space. So we failed to recruit doctors who came and visited our building over the last 3 years. There were at least 9. This is an old slide, but at least 9 doctors came and toured our building and met with us and wanted to come here, but there's just no room. So lack of space in our Wolfville Professional Center where our team is currently practicing. So I apologize if there's something about my screen here that's not showing up well. The how you got bumped. Okay. Apologies. Technology is not my strong suit. Okay, so this is local physician recruitment over the last 5 years. And what you can see in blue is the total physician recruitment. And then in orange is the residents who have trained in our family practice residency training program locally, who have stayed. And it's a very high number of the total. And then in green, you'll see, in orange, you'll see other, green is the resident graduates, and then orange is the other physician recruits. And you'll see Wolfville at the bottom. We have not recruited in the last 5 years. And I'll talk a little bit about what is going on in these other sites that have had more success recruiting. Mainly, they're team-based. They have cooperative cost sharing arrangements because of the layout of their space. Sometimes they can share staff overhead, and they have space. They have space to accommodate a new grad, as well as they're doing medical teaching on site. So what worked before doesn't work now. Wolfville, we used to have to try to keep doctors away because all they had to do is come and set up shop and, you know, join the rota. They needed one working space, and that was it. And it was pretty flexible. But now towns don't recruit doctors, teams do. Doctors want to work in teams, and our space is built in 1987. My mother, Dr. Heather Wellwood, was part of building this building. It's a beautiful building, but it's segregated into pods, and we have trouble working collaboratively as a team in this space. And we also have no space to recruit new doctors or to do medical teaching, which is a major problem in terms of sustainable recruitment for our area. So the health home model is a model when we think about, well, what does the future hold? This is endorsed by the Canadian Medical Association, among other groups, including Nova Scotia Health. And this is the concept that what we want to move towards is team-based care delivered by a primary care team, but really considering the unique needs of the community and networking with all the providers in the community to create a sustainable, accessible hub of care that goes even beyond the rooted patients of the practice, but to the community at large. And the vision is to recruit a care team that has the capacity that all community members could have access to this care and be part of that group. And specifically, the sustainability of this kind of model depends on having an adequate space for teaching and for recruiting. So many communities, Wolfville included, have started to become involved in physician recruitment and retention. And when we're talking about teams, I should be clear, we're not just talking about physicians, we're talking about allied health professionals, nurses, social workers, certified kinesiologists who work with our patients for exercise. And so Wolfville has been part of bringing on physician community navigator Brianna Hall, I understand. That's fantastic work that she's been doing. But also in visiting Chester, as you mentioned, Mayor Donovan, to know what's been going on in that community. And I think we can learn from what other communities are doing and what's working or not working in those communities. So this pamphlet that I have here is one that is put out by Nova Scotia Health, which helps guide communities in getting more engaged in physician recruitment and retention. I think it's important to think forward. How can we engage all potential stakeholders? We now have a nursing program at Acadia. And how can this all connect, and how can we think about a sustainable plan for the future for Wolfville? And again, here's the team down in Clare, but many communities are starting to get more involved and get their hands in deep about primary care in their areas. So I think it's great that there's still plans to learn more from other towns, as well as the Chester visit that's already happened. Thank you for doing that work. So these are some suggested resources, and I wanted to leave time for questions, but thank you all for your attention and time today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wellwood. I open it up to council for questions of Dr. Wellwood. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. I have two questions, if that's all right.
Sure.
My nephew just finished his residency in Ontario, and I know he was thinking about Nova Scotia, and he talked to some people at Yarmouth. And then in BC, the salaries went up for doctors, and given his debt load, he said he had no choice but to take up a locum in British Columbia.
Right.
And I'm wondering if salaries in Nova Scotia is an additional factor?
Great question. Thank you. So we've just negotiated a new contract for family physicians in Nova Scotia, which is competitive with what they're doing in BC. It's a little different, but I think you'll find that it's competitive, and your nephew may want to reach out to Doctors Nova Scotia to find out what that looks like for him.
Okay,
Yeah.
Great. And my second question is around the EKM. Because my grandfather was part of building that hospital building. I know that it was built by the community, and I know that Berwick uses the WKM for physician offices. And I'm wondering, like, what's the space? I haven't been in that structure really. for years. So I don't know if it's being fully utilized or if that would be a temporary.
Great question.
Yeah.
EKM has always been a big community partner in providing care with the local physicians, and we've been part of the ROTA there since I started practice 14 years ago. So mainly right now, we're servicing unattached patients at that clinic, which is open 6 days a week. That space, it's an older building. It is owned by the health authority. That's different than the Berwick facility. And my understanding is that that's part of, it's been a barrier to allowing that to be developed as a space for private practice, which is one of the challenges in our community that's unique.
Yeah, that just seems wrong to me, but thank you.
Counselor Ingham?
Yeah, it's really disappointing to hear. I mean, Wolf is such a desirable place to live and everybody seems to want to live here. So are you saying it's really hard to recruit physicians here because of the team-based model that we don't currently have? Like that's the biggest barrier?
Oh, thank you for that question. We have a team-based.
Okay.
We have a team. We've created a collaborative team at Wolfville Professional
Okay,
Center.
that was my next question.
It's awkwardly executed because we're in silos in the design of the building is not facilitating team-based care. But we've soldiered through, the design of the building and not enabling the care to be as finessed as it would be if we had a proper design for team-based care is an issue. But the biggest issue is not having space to bring on learners who are interested in coming and learning from us and then thinking, hey, Wolfville would be a great place to practice. I might come stay here. Or residents who actually come and stay for 2 years while they do their residency program. And many of them stay. The evidence says if the residency program is in the community, in that specific community, you're much more likely to stay in practice there. So right now we have one resident in our practice, but we will never be able to bring on more than one resident with the current layout that we have.
So you can't grow. I mean, I know that building quite well. And even if you basically renovated it, it would be still really difficult. Am I correct in that? Or is there any possibility that you looked at to see how you could do it in that building as the location as well? Like just.
Yeah, so renovations would not be an option for the current owners of the building.
Okay.
But if the building was acquired, by others or a foundation to support a more collaborative layout or to increase capacity space, I think that's a conversation to be had. Yes.
And what square footage would be optimal, just out of curiosity?
I
Or do
can't
you
say
even
that.
have
I
that?
can't say that's my strength. Like whether the
Yeah.
building could grow upwards and expand the parking. Parking is a major issue too.
Okay.
So I think both things could be looked at.
Okay.
As well as, should we look at an offsite option or a separate option or move into a totally new space or perhaps have two teams that do, like, I have lots of ideas.
Yeah, no,
I'm also keen to continue on as a partner, like if people want to continue conversations and many of my colleagues are interested in this area too. So,
Okay, thank you.
Can I just build on Councillor Ingham's comment? Your response that you are not in a position, is that from a financial or capacity as opposed to rather than you're not willing to see that building space change?
Oh, I think that, so the majority of the owners in the building, I can't speak for everyone, are physicians. And I think, ultimately we're interested in patient care.
Okay.
And I don't think there's opposition to changing the building.
Okay.
But,
Sure.
or perhaps selling the building.
Yes.
But
Okay.
I can't speak.
So
for
you would
all
not be
others.
against something on that site. It's just that it's not your.
I think
evaluation.
we have to understand like
Yeah.
what the vision is, how it,
Sure.
and I would say, it's all open for conversation. We've certainly had these conversations in our group and the owners are aware and interested in continuing those conversations. Yeah.
Councillor Elliott?
Thank you. Just wanted to check on the EKM Foundation.
Yes.
I don't think that they've been terribly active recently, but I'm wondering if you've been in discussion with them in terms of finances.
Yes. Thank you, Wendy. The difficulty is that to the best of my knowledge, EKM Foundation does not invest in bricks and mortar. And so in terms of renovations or new building or altered building,
Land.
I'm not sure about land, Wendy. Good question. Yeah.
Okay.
We just haven't gotten that far.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I did actually follow
Thank
up with the EKM because it was my understanding, and I was wrong in that, that the EKM was the manager of that space, but they are not, they're the fundraisers. And so they did, I have not followed up, but they did tell me who the manager was, so that's my learning. Other questions? So I'm going to ask, what is council's pleasure? And would somebody like to move a motion? And I'm looking at you, Councillor McKay, because you really brought this to us.
Yeah, I would like to continue the conversations. This is sort of my daily job too, so a little bit of insight. And I could say our practice did move from one location to another and did take on a resident, did recruit a new doctor, did get a social worker. Right? So we had been growing, but only because we have the space to do so. So it is crucial. So I would, I don't know, CEO, what we could do, but could we maybe do a subcommittee of what we've got, create a subcommittee to create or to continue those conversations and bring back further recommendations?
So Jody and the mayor and I did go down to Chester just to understand their model, and I was familiar with it a bit because the Our Health Center was just starting when I left Chester in 2014. The other one that we wanted to get to, but the rain event didn't allow for, was Clare. And they're a very different model where the municipality actually owns and operates their collaborative care facility. So we do want to go and learn about that. So maybe as a next step, we do that meeting with the three of us and we come back with a report to committee of the whole. And then at that time, you can kind of get a little bit more information on what other municipal partners are doing. And then we can decide, is this something that you want to refer to budget? Do we need a subcommittee? But I think that information would be really helpful, both Chester's and Clare's.
So that's actually underway. Do we need a motion or just direction to staff, maybe?
I think just direction, and I'm hoping that we can get that road trip to Clare scheduled either for the end of this month or early October. So the timing should align to bring something back October, November to council and continue the discussion if that works.
That work for council? Okay, so we'll take that. All right, so that is we have a next step. Thank you, Dr. Wellwood, and thank you for, I know you have a very busy day as all of our presenters too, but I think you might have clients in your office right now, so you're welcome to stay, but you may also leave.
Thanks so much.
Okay. So our next presentation, Catherine Ryan from the Randall House.
Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. Let me just get can't see my file. How do I get into if you wouldn't mind, thanks. I just want to start the presentation. I just can't get to the start slideshow button because the interface is in the way. Oh, thank you. You good? I can start? Right. And I can drag this out of the way. Great. All right. Like you said, my name is Catherine Ryan. For the past few years, I've been the volunteer head of the Randall House Management Committee, which is our Wolfville's Community Museum. For a time, I also sat on the board of the Wolfville Historical Society, who owns and operates the Randall House Museum. I'm also here representing Martin Hallett, who was traveling, so unable to be here,
but he's the current president of the Wolfville Historical Society. So just briefly, a little background. The Wolfville Historical Society was founded in 1941. And the Patrickman family donated the Randall House, which sits next to Willow Park, in 1947 to be run as a museum and to house the growing collection of artifacts concerning Wolfville and area's history. For many years, membership had several hundred people and enjoyed a strong volunteer voice and a healthy working board. This is a picture of the board in sort of the mid-90s, very healthy board, lots of people. Today, membership has fallen to below 100 and due to aging membership and honestly, this changes in people's ability to volunteer. And the current board consists of only 6 people and several of whom would probably like to step down, but just don't feel able to. The WHS's, the Wolfville Historical Society, the WHS's current mandate is to tell the history of Wolfville and the surrounding area by collecting, preserving, and interpreting artifacts, archival material, and intangible forms of heritage. It's to cultivate a greater understanding of the people and events that have shaped the area from the earliest inhabitants to contemporary times through research, publications, exhibitions, public programs, and other activities. So not all of that is museum dependent. There's a life outside of the museum that the Historical Society has had. In the past, running the museum and preserving its collection was only one of these activities. And it has programmed town events, talks, was actively involved in preserving the built heritage in our town and area. It awarded the Kirk Connell Prize to graduating high school students, acted as a consultant on matters of heritage for the town and public, and several of its members published books about our local history, which are available at the museum, incidentally. As the WHS board volunteer members have dwindled, its ability to deliver meaningful programming has as well. Back in 2013, the society seriously considered selling the museum because having the museum was taking all of the time and financial resources and preventing it from doing meaningful programming in town. It was felt that the museum is very much the public face of the Historical Society. And so they endeavored to keep it by bringing its programming out to the community, trying to raise the profile of the society and gain a few members. In fact, that's how I came to be aware of the organization. Sadly, it hasn't really worked over time. The numbers have continued to dwindle, and the problem of our resources being drained by the museum is still a problem. So continuing to that, slowly the museum's exterior has been degrading, and just back in November 2022, I had a meeting with a heritage builder, and he estimated the cost to be in excess of $200,000 for things like siding, the wood windows, the trim, the soffits, the chimneys, the roof, basically the entire exterior envelope of the building. So, pardon me here. So while there are different avenues for organizations like the WHS to source funding, these types of repairs, the problem is really that we don't have the key administrators that we used to. We've lost a number, including the treasurer, in the past couple of years. There's very little life force left remaining in the group to carry out the fundraising. Beginning in May of 2023, the board and a selection of volunteers started engaging in visioning exercises to determine the best path forward. During the course of those exercises, we tried to envision the society's future without the museum and what activities it might engage in. what became clear through the exercise is that if the society no longer, that they no longer have the energy to continue the historical society activities themselves. So if we were to sell or otherwise divest the museum, the society would very likely not have a reason to exist or the energy to exist. So there's a bigger problem at heart there. After the revelations, these revelations, the remaining board members considered the appropriate fate of the museum in the future. And three possible actions were considered. One was to donate the museum and its contents to another interested and capable party to continue running as a museum. The other was to donate the building to the community so as to be repurposed and remain publicly available. But in this case, we'd still need to find somewhere to put the collection, and we'd have to find a new home for funding we'd have to still repair the building, find funding for that. And option three was to sell the building privately in hopes that the owner would keep the historical exterior, but there's no guarantee within 2 years, there's nothing holding a new owner to doing so. So these options were considered, and what really seemed more than likely was that the third option was most likely, and that Wolfville would be losing this museum. Without a change in the operational model and some considered effort, keeping the museum open to the public just didn't seem possible at that point, which is a shame, because here's a woodcut of people skating on the pond when they used to do that, and the Randall House in the back. The Randall House has been open for over 75 years as a museum. The museum's location and beautiful gardens are extremely prominent upon the entrance to the east side of town. And in the span of the last 3 months, it has welcomed over 2,000 visitors through its doors and with its programming. It is one of the only remaining structures in town from the early 1800s and the only one available to the public. By walking through its rooms and taking in its collections, students and visitors are able to immerse themselves in the town's story, which has proven to be the best way to learn about our past. There are no other similar family-friendly sites in town, and it offers some much needed diversity to the town's experience, which is great, but largely centered around culinary and beverage experiences. This is just a sample of some of the programming we've done in the past year or two. Museum employees have acted as community partners, and their seasonal activities have supported the town of Wolfville, Acadia University, and various Valley heritage groups by collaborating on town tours, summer camp programming, teas, music, crafting, heritage events, and all other manner of events. Our collection currently houses thousands of artifacts and would otherwise have no place to be stored, preserved, or exhibited. The building is useful in that way as well. It has provided quality student employment for years, 2 students every year on top of our seasonal curator. And in many cases, they've gone on to be residents of Wolfville or become employed in the heritage sector. It is valuable employment to them. And upon considering these facts, the remaining members of the WHS have decided to use the remaining funds to employ me as the development manager for part-time over the next 2 years. In that position, my goals are to raise funds for and oversee the repairs of Randall House, identify and apply for strategic funding grants to help pay for the second year of that proposed position, restructure our governing body, and this is important, and its foundational documents to be engaged only in the support of the museum and not other activities. Create a business plan that identifies new operational structure, realistic revenue streams, efficiencies, potential sponsorships, marketing plans, and possibilities for self-generating revenue. We'd like to continue operating through the 2024 and 2025 seasons, update and revise the strategic plan, including an interpretive plan, just to, at the end of this, to provide a vision for the future and the way to go forward. And finally, find funding for and to participate in the design of a website for the museum, which needs some updating. And finally, going forward, the Randall House will seek to strengthen our ties with Wolfville and hopes to serve the residents by keeping the house open to the public and being flexible to the needs of our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Very informative. Questions of council for Catherine.
I have one.
Councillor Butler?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm a history buff, I'm not gonna lie. A couple of things. So as you were going through the presentation, you mentioned that there is funding available. It's just finding someone to be able to sit down and apply for those grants and all of that kind of stuff. Okay. Has the Historical Society reached out to any additional organizations that have those resources that maybe you could, like, I'm thinking, I know a lot of places that have received a lot of money over the last couple of years that you could pull some of their resources, nonprofit organizations, other museums like Prescott House or the Charles McDonald House, I know has received a lot of money over the last couple of years. So if there's any way to say, hey, we're a fellow museum, can you help us out a little bit? Do you have someone that could do that? Has that been
Do you mean someone else to fundraise?
so sort of just if you're missing that component of a grant writer or a grant researcher,
Mhm.
maybe those other museums have one that if they're not doing that at the moment, they can assist. Like, I don't know if the historical societies sort of, they talk to each other, you know, the West Hants Historical Society, and say, hey, do you have someone that's not doing a grant right now? Can they come assist us? Because we don't have that person.
I would say myself and our seasonal curator have been doing quite a lot of networking.
Good.
We're currently composing a list. We've been definitely keeping an eye on the other fundraising efforts
Mhm.
in town, and myself and there's a couple other potential volunteers who are interested. Now that change is happening, we're eager to take on new volunteers, and we're seeking people with a special skill set. I've got a couple people that I plan to meet, and if anybody else knows of somebody, I'd love to hear it. I'm composing a list now that there's somebody in my role to be coordinating those things. That's what we plan to do going forward.
Okay.
I am the person to tell all your information to.
And then just one other point, it's Acadia related because
Mhm.
the Randall House being a historical building, most of the other historical buildings are either on Acadia property or adjacent to. So there is a strong love of history.
Mhm.
I took history there.
Yes.
But in my time at Acadia, which was a very long time ago, I took everything from Canadian studies, Canadian short stories, as much history as I could. Nowhere in that time frame was I ever told that Wolfville had a museum on its grounds. So I don't know if it's possible through the history department at Acadia to maybe for those 4 years, recruit some of that youth to come in and introduce them to this museum. Maybe they could be a part of the board or have some duties just as practice as part of their degree. History has moved from let's go visit a museum to let's go online and look at pictures and take a virtual tour of this museum. That is not the same thing.
No.
That's a great picture of a costume. There's something about seeing it in person and seeing a picture of somebody from 1830, seeing, you know,
Mhm.
that's me being an actor on the Valley Ghost Walks forever. It is embedded in my head how important the history is of any town. So I don't know if there's been any discussions with Acadia and the history department to sort of maybe even just this presentation was great. If that was done in front of the intro history class, maybe they would come down and visit, and then they have to walk down Main Street and see all the other historical buildings. They might take a ghost walk. They might know that there's more to this town than the
Mhm.
present.
Yes to everything you're saying.
Yeah.
We actually, one of our newest board members is on the history faculty. And a number of our students that have gone through in the past few years are Acadia history students. We're making our way in there slowly. It's certainly a resource that is right in front of us.
Councillor Palmer.
Thank you. Maybe a little bit outside of your scope of your presentation, but the building itself, what kind of shape is it? I mean, the $200,000 estimate.
Yeah.
Sounds low. I hate to tell you, but
It
I mean, it
probably-
doesn't go very far
Yeah.
today is
Yeah.
why I'm saying that. Like, foundation wise, I'm sure it's a balloon frame. It must be a balloon Must be that era, it must be a balloon frame, so that's gonna create some structural problems and.
I'm told the interior structure is sound. It certainly is an old and sort of, it's not built in the same way buildings are now, but the foundation is sound, the structure interior is sound.
Okay.
But I'm told if we don't address the outside, which yes, may well go over that, until somebody starts renovating it, we're really not going to know the extent of damage. I'm told if we don't address the exterior, it's going to start affecting the interior. And when it starts affecting the interior, we have a number of textile collection items and paper items in that space. We'd love to have an offsite storage space, but it is difficult to maintain, to afford that. That's another thing we'd be looking for. If we don't address those exterior issues, then it's going to start affecting our collection, which is another problem. We have to keep it dry. It doesn't necessarily have to be warm, but it needs to be dry. It hates to be wet.
That's great, thank you.
Councillor Ingham.
Thanks for the presentation, Catherine. I walked down Victoria Avenue all the time, so the exterior does need a lot of work. Over the years, even 5-6 years, I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And what's so beautiful about that spot is the people that maintain the gardens
Yeah.
do such a great job.
They do.
I mean, there's the lavender, you're walking around, you see the bees pollinating. So that's like a real draw to that site too, like not just the inside, but the outside also. So do you figure that if you can get these renovations and things can be more tight, you'd be able to market it better and have more programming and then thus going out to the public a little bit more?
At the moment, it doesn't even have a marketing plan. But the root of the problem is there's just not people to do it anymore. So it always comes back to that. We hire our curator for not even half the year. Crystal Tanner, she's been excellent for the past few years. And our students, they do the bulk of the work, which is just not enough. We really need oversight throughout the whole year. And our volunteer gardeners have been doing an excellent job. It's actually historical garden. Everything that grows in that garden is approximately 1850s. Yeah. Yeah, it is. Yeah. I have a sign to erect once we can get someone to build it.
Is there little walkabout signs where you have the little,
That somebody
signs in
at some point had put some up, but
Yeah.
it's very uncoordinated. I
they
would
are
say.
beautiful though.
They
They
are.
work really hard
Yeah.
at them. That's the
Yeah.
first thing that I noticed. And then,
It's I get all the time that I haven't been in that museum forever, but I love seeing it. The gardens are beautiful, that sort of thing. It's maybe not, it's, how do I put this? A lot of residents probably don't go every weekend. That's not the way people enjoy museums. Largely it's visitors and then residents take in quality programming. And then they appreciate the view, the beautiful gardens. It's part of the Eastern Gateway welcome essentially as it stands right now.
Councillor McKay.
Thanks. Is the building itself not a registered heritage building?
It is.
Yeah, okay, so you, when you start to renovate it, it needs to be done in that certain way
Yeah,
and that structure.
it does. There's leniency. For example, we don't need to put slate tiles on the roof. It doesn't currently have it. They're reasonable, but we need to keep it looking in its Georgian style. We can't just go and put a modern addition on, for example.
Okay.
But we could, for example, if we needed to someday have better kitchen facilities, which we don't currently have, we would be allowed to do that inside. Right.
Okay, so all wonderful information and things I didn't know, so that thank you for sharing this.
Of course.
What is the ask? So are we, because we do give some money through our budgeting process, what we started a few years ago, an annual contribution of 10.
10.
Okay.
Yes.
So that probably doesn't go very far.
No.
So is it, are we looking for a partnership? Or is that something for us to discuss later of what we'd
think
like to
it's-
do
yeah.
next? Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
So
I'd
do you
say
have
that's
an
all.
ideal of what you would like?
Sure.
from us?
Well, I'd like to, of course, maintain the $10,000. It is absolutely relied on. To be honest, we're operating at a deficit every year. I think it would be one of my top priorities to try and find a way to make it more sustainable, because we can't operate the way we've been operating. And now with the additional exterior repairs, which I would say is the most urgent situation. I really need to find funding for that. That's going to be my focus. If there's anything I will be asking for in the future, I'm sure it will be related to exterior repairs. I'm going to do my best to find all sources of funding. But just because of the urgency of that, our collection is at risk, and the longer we leave it, the worse it's going to get. Certainly like to maintain the funding we receive, and if I ever ask for anything, it will be related to the exterior, which would be a one-time ask, because I really, that's my priority.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
I just wanted to confirm you are a registered charity, are you not?
We are, yeah.
So you can issue charitable tax receipts when people donate.
We can,
Okay.
yes. There will be some changes upcoming in maybe the name, or we need to clarify what the board and the charity that runs the museum does. So there will be some changes in the foundational documents, that sort of thing.
Right. But for fundraising purposes, you
We
can
will
issue.
always be a registered charity.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
I have a couple of questions, and not to put staff on the spot, but I'm going to. Either Nick or Devon, the parks plan that is underway, and given the proximity of the museum to Willow Park and to the Eastern Gateway, is this on the radar of the consultants in terms of the synergies of that site?
Yes, we have that in our schedule to reach out to Catherine, actually.
Right. And this actually might be a Mike question. The funding that we provide the museum and other groups like the Lions, that comes out of the partnership, the strategic partnership initiative. It is a staff managed. Help remind me, does that process ever come back during budget to council to, or is it a pot that staff manages?
There's an overarching policy from council for the grants. There's the strategic partners and community partnership program, so SPP, CPP. The part managed by staff is what I call smaller dollars that they can vary year to year to community groups. The historical societies is included in the strategic partners, where it's a set amount over 4-year cycle for the policy. And that was just renewed, I think, about a year and a half ago. So the Historical Society has received 10,000 through that program, which all the other groups in there get 5. Not that that makes it last any longer for the Historical Society, but I think council has recognized the importance. It's just finding the funds. So that part of it is a set amount each year.
Okay, and so that does come to council.
And it is, yeah, as part of the budget process, there's
Right.
a slide that
All right.
shows the dollar amounts.
And just for information of new councillors, that amount was set and during Mayor Stead's term, and then confirmed during my first term, and it really offsets the taxes that for some reason we charge groups like the museum. They are charged property tax. I don't understand why personally, and I've argued against that, but so I'm glad to hear that that's something that will come to the council table for discussion, kind of to respond to Councillor McKay's comment. So Catherine, at this stage, this is for information. It is clear that there will be ongoing discussions. There's no other, we don't need another motion.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I just want to make it clear that with our changes in the way we're going to be run, what we are looking for is community partners and are open to the needs of the community and ideas.
Okay. Can I ask Nick, is this something that's on your radar, that in terms of coming back to council at some time with your thoughts? You're Mr. Recreation now, that's why I asked. All right, thank you.
Can I ask a
Councillor
question?
McKay? Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Since we have our WBDC people in our front row.
Segue.
Maybe this was a really nice partnership we can do some really interesting things. So maybe we can talk about it at the next meeting.
Super. I love that.
Good segue.
I love that. CAO,
Oh,
sit down.
we-
You're not done.
We do have a one-time capital grant program and the application date is coming up November 1st. So maybe Nick, that would be something to sit down and look at because I think you'd be a great candidate to apply to that. And then it goes through the budget process with council, but that's open right now and it's a good window of time for it.
Okay, so November 1st, the grant. Okay.
I just love the synergies in this town and the people, and if you get up the right people in the room together, then great things happen. Thank you, Catherine.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
And that's a great segue into the WBDC. I don't know what, welcome. Kelly, I'll let you introduce your group if you would. Thank you. Kelly Van Nykerk is you are the chair of co-chair.
Co-chair, Sarah and
And
I.
Sarah Anderson is the co-chair, so welcome. I will let you present and also if you'd introduce your other guests.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Donovan. Thanks to council for inviting us here today. As she mentioned, my name is Kelly. I'm the co-chair with Sarah of the WBDC. And we have our board member, Aaron Haysom, who represents the church in the room, as well as our new coordinator, Tanvi, who I think is known to most of you in the town. We're really excited to have her on board and helping us actually move forward on all these great ideas and projects that we have. So she's definitely been a great help so far in the last couple of weeks. Okay, so today, let me just go into presentation mode here. All right. Okay. Yeah, this is a picture of Atlantis. This is our ideal goal for Wolfville. No, I'm just- yeah, exactly. So we presented our strategic plan in April, and one component of our strategic plan was around placemaking initiatives. So the purpose of us being here today is really just to give you an update on kind of the status of what those placemaking initiatives are, and to get your feedback and answer any questions that you might have. I know everyone is aware of what placemaking is, but I just wanted to throw this up there to kind of remind you as to why the WBDC is involved in these initiatives. Really, we see these placemaking initiatives as a driving force towards economic growth. So using the community's local assets, inspiration and potential with the intention of creating these public spaces to make the public healthy and happy, promote wellness and well-being, which in turn brings growth to the economy. So that's kind of the reason why we want to be involved in these initiatives. Okay, so we had set out to accomplish 3 projects for 2023. The first 2 take place down on Waterfront Park, which sort of roll up into a broader initiative known as making Waterfront Park a destination. And I'm going to touch on that further in this presentation. So those 2 initiatives are putting hammocks along Waterfront Park. And the second is a Wolfville sign, which we had mentioned at the AGM, which I think most of you attended. So I'll be covering those 2. And then the third project was a parklet along Main Street. So Waterfront Park is a destination. Waterfront Park, in my mind, is very representative of Wolfville's brand. It is has the most iconic views of Cape Blomidon. It has the highest tides. It has this very central location in the town. And should be the place to go for community and tourists and visitors and students. But in order to really make it that destination and bring it to its full potential, we want to make it more connected. We want to open it up, make it more visible. So connect it to the trail by removing that fence and the hedge along the back. We want to bring people to the park. So we want to put things in the park that will bring people there, making it a destination. We want to bring business to the park. If you think about the waterfront in Halifax, for example, it has kiosks that run businesses on the waterfront, but they wouldn't be there if it weren't for the fact that the waterfront is already a destination. It's not the kiosks that make it a destination, it's everything else. And then the kiosks are there as businesses to take advantage and add to that. So those are kind of the things that we see needing to happen in order for it to be a destination. And everything that we do, we want to make sure we're designing for the future. So we know that there's a big parks plan in place, or you're working on it. And, you know, this waterfront park is likely to change. So we want to be mindful of that and make sure that anything we're talking about takes that into account. But we also want to make improvements now. We don't necessarily want to wait for years and years. We see that these are things that we can implement in the short term that can have an effect, but can also be taken away or changed easily. And then mostly we just really want to create this space for families and community and tourism. So the hammocks. So we've done several site visits, and we've kind of identified an area where we could place 4 hammocks along the rose bush, the hedge line. So the man in the statue is kind of to the left of this, and then the viewpoint is over on this end, and the parking lot is just here behind this rose hedge. So we like this area because it's not really used for you know, big events, for example. Those take place more down by the gazebo. It's sort of secluded, so you don't have a lot of high traffic. You could relax in the hammocks, you still have the nice view. And if we were to remove the fence and the hedge along the trail side, we wouldn't want the hammocks along there, because then you're kind of right up next to the trail. So you don't necessarily want to have people walking by you while you're laying in a hammock. We also identified a secondary location down by the gazebo along those rocks where we could put maybe 2 or 3 more. But we felt that this would be the primary spot this year. And if there is success, we could look at adding 2 more maybe next year. But this is what we wanted to move forward with right away. And then the hammocks that we are looking to use are the same as the ones that are on Halifax waterfront. The company who implemented them actually designed a blueprint that you can sort of download and then send to a manufacturer, and they create them using the exact same blueprint. And there's a number of really nice colors and materials that we can choose from. Not necessarily the color that you see here. This is just a picture, but that's something that we've been working with staff on to identify the location and the colors and that kind of thing. So moving along to the Wolfville sign. So this is a mock-up of where we have kind of landed. We've done a lot of research on this and looked at a lot of different locations and different designs for the sign. And initially, when we had thought we wanted to do a sign, we were trying to echo something like the Toronto sign or the Kingston, Ontario sign, where the eye was missing and you would stand in it. But we've kind of moved away from that, which are more, you know, kind of plastic type tourist specific signs, and move more in this direction using a local artist who does metal work and keeping the eye in the sign and putting it up on the rocks. It's now kind of more of an art installation and less of a plastic type sign. So I personally love it because I think it just really echoes the vista and dikes and the basin in the colors and the way it kind of sits on the rocks. And this location, we think it's ideal because it doesn't necessarily block any view of Cape Blomidon. And yet it's still very central when you walk into the park. It's on that diagonal corner. So when people stand in front of it, in front of those rocks for pictures, it's also not blocking traffic, pedestrian traffic along the path, versus if you had it kind of along the flat side facing straight onto Blomidon, it could be in the way if people were gathering to take photos. And having it bolted into the rocks is also better than having it in the ground. It's actually safer because it's more secure. Yeah, we actually brought a W. Do you want to, so this is a mock-up of what the actual material would look like. If you want to have a look, do you want to take it right over to them so they can see it? And so the artist's name is Al Sims. I know Aaron's worked really closely with him before. He's done a lot of other big projects in Nova Scotia, and he has a website if you want to see some of his other work that he's done. No, this is not the size. Yeah.
Well, that was brought up that maybe we should do that or have the option at Christmas time.
Yeah, yes. Yes, it would be great to decorate as well. And I have a couple other pictures on here just of different perspectives of it. So this is me kind of cropped into it. And this isn't exact, but just to give you an idea of what it would look like. And, you know, we don't necessarily want to encourage people to climb up on the rocks. The idea is that you would stand in front of it, but even today, without the sign there, people climb on the rocks. That's a thing. So it is going to happen. You know, it's climb at your own risk kind of thing, but it's not meant to be scaled. That's just another perspective there, a bit closer up. So yeah, we'd love your thoughts and any comments on that, but we think that this is the type of impact we want to make in that space. I think people will want to come here to the park to stand in front of this and take pictures. I think they'll like it. I think it's something that visitors and tourists can enjoy. And I love that it's working with a local artist, and I love that it's more of a piece of art versus just a sign. So those are my thoughts on it. Okay, so moving on to our third project, which was the Main Street Parklet. So the purpose of this was to use the pavement sidewalk in front of the town center where Shoppers is, to create like a park space essentially for people to connect and relax and sit and enjoy and feel happy, which is a great idea. And we've gone down the road of putting quite a bit of time and effort into researching what we could do with that space and what might work there. And the town had applied for some funding through the Nova Scotia government for this project. It's a streetscape beautification program, and received $17,500 to put towards the project, which needs to be matched. And the plan was for the WBDC to match that funding for a total of $35,000. As we started looking into this further and trying to figure out what would work best in that space, we came to a number of conclusions. It is a very prominent piece of sidewalk in town. It's very front and center. It is town center it's also where the bus stops, which may or may not change. But essentially, we felt that the $35,000, while it is a lot of money, certainly to the WBDC, isn't a lot of money when you're looking at doing a major project on Main Street. And what that area needs is probably something that's a lot more thoughtful and planned out and built into a larger vision for the area. So we would at this point recommend taking a step back from this project and not moving forward with it. I feel that with the $35,000, we would be able to essentially put in kind of a bench along that concrete area. Is that a good use of our time, our resources and our funding, not necessarily. And it might just kind of be a Band-Aid solution for something that needs a lot more. So that's, while we have put quite a bit of time into it already, I think that that's the conclusion we've come to now at this point. But if the town is interested in looking at that space and doing something there, we'd be happy to provide you with what we've learned and some of our designs and work with you on that. But the WBDC won't be moving forward with it at this point. So then that's it. Presentation.
Thank you, Kelly and Sarah. Questions of members of council? Thanks, Councillor.
Oh,
Butler.
yes.
Oh, sorry, that's okay. Councillor Butler, Deputy Mayor.
I love the Woelfel sign. I really do. You just touched a little bit on the safety factor. As beautiful as it will be, all I could think about as soon as you showed me the first image was Peggy's Cove. And how many people, no matter what, crawl out on the rocks, get swept out, need additional resources to come in. And it's, I know you can't fix that kind of thing. People will do it no matter what, but it looked very inviting for people to get up on the rocks and get behind it. And I just don't know the logistics of what the town can do to make sure that that is a safe environment. I have a fear of heights. I don't go out on the rocks. I don't go, I love that park. It looks like the perfect spot for it, but I just didn't know what else would be in its place to make sure that it is a safe spot. One sign saying don't climb up on the rocks, they're going to do it anyway. Especially when you have events, lots of kids, that type of thing. So I didn't know what else was discussed at that level. It was just minorly touched on.
Definitely it.
Nope, you were on.
I think it's definitely a valid concern. I think when we discussed it, the sentiment was that everybody is all over those rocks already. And it is already dangerous. I have mini panic attacks every time I'm down there. I'm like, okay, so I don't know that this would necessarily make that any different than it already is today. I think having a sign in front of it saying, don't climb on it actually might deter people from going up on the rocks. More, so in fact, there might be less people on the rocks. And also just encouraging people to take pictures in front of it. I think that's all that we can do. It's not going to, I think that the risk is the encouragement to go up to it. I don't think that it is, there would be a safety issue from like an engineering perspective in terms of them falling over or anything like that. We're going to work with a structural engineer, and that I think will be fine, but it's more just back to people going on the rocks in general.
Deputy Mayor.
I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation, and it's lovely to see such new energy and new ideas. I know that the hammocks down in Halifax are very, very popular and a very welcoming feature. So I think some of these I sort of echo Councillor Butler's thoughts around safety of the sign, but at the same time, as you say, there are already challenges, and whether or not this would make it worse is something that could be debated. I'm just wondering, and this wasn't part of your presentation, but a while back, there'd been some discussion around murals and other things in town. Is those projects on hold, not moving forward?
Yeah, so the mural, we did complete the 2 murals last year, right? And then in terms of murals for this year, we were looking at redoing the sidewalk murals as part of the placemaking. But we are no longer working with the same vendor. The WBDC is not working with KDP Letters, who did the murals. And so she won't be doing the window displays at Christmas either, just as an FYI. So that has been paused for now until we decide what direction to go in. Yeah. But so no more, we're not looking at any big murals anywhere at this point. Just the sidewalk was the only thing on the plan.
Just that the one by Charts and others are so have been so well received.
Yeah.
And so it was a,
We did receive funding from COA to do that, so there, and that same funding wasn't available this year as well.
Councillor Palmer?
Thank you. I just want to open disclosure. I was sitting in a WBDC's meeting yesterday, so I kind of saw this presentation yesterday, and I was thinking about your hammocks. When you go to put those hammocks in, you might want to talk to, and I think his name is Ford, who just retired.
From utility?
Yeah.
It's for-
Ford, talk to a long-term person here before you put those footings into what's underneath, like that's infill.
Yeah.
So is it boulder or is it something that you can get into? So before you get too far down that road and find out that it's boulders this size, that you'll never get those in,
Do
so.
you have a name for?
Well, Ford would have been here when that infill was in, that's why I was thinking of him.
We can chat internally to see who the best person might be. We may have some records that
Okay,
can
great.
fill that in.
Thank you.
Councillor McKay?
Thank you. I too love the waffle sign as it is. I know it's been through the iterations of it. I love the color of it. I think it fits the vista as well. I like the location because it does bring you in. I actually think it works really well, and with the statue on the side, like it's sort of just cohesive in its way. I actually picture the fireworks in the background as opposed to Christmas, but it would be stunning. I hope someone takes a picture of that. I like that the eye is in it actually, because I think having the eye out would encourage people to go up and stand in it. But if our plaque said something to the effect of, this is an art installation by Al, then I have a tendency, like, if kids are going like, oh, that's art, don't touch that. It's not just something to climb on. Love the hammocks as well. Can't wait to, I always think there's always like chairs and things are missing down there because you don't often carry your own blanket down there. So having hammocks and stuff will be nice. In terms of the wayfinding, I always wish, I don't know how we do it, but I hate the sandwich boards. They're just not accessible. They're always in the middle of the streets. But if we can find a way for business to get rid of those, to put signs on the sides of like the McKay building that's on the corner, like something cool for wayfinding, and that way would be neat too. I know the ones on the pavement are nice too, but you really have to look for them. But if there was something cool in that way, I don't know if that's part of a street beautification way we can work that into that grant or not, but something a little bit different. But okay with leaving the bus stop empty for now, because that is probably a bigger project than what you've got. But but thanks for recognizing that you're not going to be able to, that's not, sometimes that's half the battle, is recognize you can't do it all and can't fit that in. So yeah, it looks great. Thanks for that.
Thank you. I also love the sign. I think it's great. I have one of Al's installations in my yard and I really love it. So I think that looks great. I'm going to make the assumption that somebody is talking again to our, I know you were talking to our staff about the development of that park in Devour. So it's Devour.
Devour, love it.
Yeah, good. Okay, so that's super. I think it's great. All the more power to you. With respect to the development at the town center, I think there may be some things in the not too distant future that will have an influence on that site. I do know, and I'm racking my brain, it was years ago when I was on the WBDC and Suzanne Balcom was the president, that there was a discussion about the fact that there is nowhere aside from the waterfront park. If somebody is working downtown and wants to just sit and have a coffee break, and so I think it's really needed. I often, when I walk by the post office, think like, could that be more than just an open green grass? But understand that it will be more than the 35,000, but I think it's a good idea. I hope that we don't lose in the process, and maybe there may be some things in the offing that would allow us to look at that again. One of the things that also went through my mind, as you know, King's Transit is doing a review of their of their roots and so on. And one of the things, I don't know if this is a session that maybe I took or maybe something at the, actually it was an International Town and Gown session where bus stops are no longer just a kiosk or a bus stop, particularly where there are students, but they are looking for something with Wi-Fi and something that's a little more connected. So that I'll try and find that session and send it off to you, but it was the first time I kind of realized that bus stops are not just bus stops, they're actually congregating in social spaces. So something to keep in mind.
We really like the post office space as well to do something, but the reason why we didn't focus on that for this project was because the whole concept of the parklet was to repurpose pavement,
Yes,
right?
yes.
As opposed to an existing green space, but we
Yeah.
definitely think that there's opportunity to do some more seating
Yes.
along the post office in the interim.
It's not intimate. It's not, you know, if you're sitting there reading a book, there's just open space.
Yeah.
Anyways,
I'm gonna take this opportunity to ask, does the town own that one, or is that?
well, I'm going to defer to staff. Yes.
But there will be an art mural on that side
Yeah.
from,
Yeah.
right? So it will also draw people in there. So maybe it will be an interesting green space to sit with a cultural.
Right. Right.
Can I just add one thing?
Absolutely.
Just as you're thinking about all that, can you just really keep the shade and factor in mind? Because a lot of the times people don't want to sit outside because, and at the waterfront, there's no shade, right? So when you're thinking about this, how can, you know, we provide shade to? And the hammocks, put a little umbrella at the top. Yeah, yeah.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Very informative, and thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And all of your group. All right, that brings us to public input. Do we have anybody online? And I think we lost the person I thought might be here for public input, so. All right, it does not appear that we have anybody for public input, either online or in person. So that brings us to committee reports internal, and I'll just go through and ask the chair if there's anything else they want to ask. Audit committee
As submitted.
as submitted, planning advisory committee. And our CMP advisory committee has submitted. That brings us to the CAO report.
Just a couple things. The Community Safety Office feasibility study work is underway, and I see that Dr. Schneider has reached out to council this morning to schedule one-on-ones. I'd encourage everyone to participate in that. I think it's going to be really important to get council's feedback right from the get-go to set the tone. So that's underway. The nuisance party bylaw is slated to go to second reading at council. We have had staff do an open house. They've done a session with the informal landlords group, and we've had feedback through Wolfville Bloom. So that's been summarized into a what we heard report, which will be part of your agenda package to inform that discussion coming up direct to council. So stay tuned for that. I just wanted, we've got a bit of good news. I'm going to turn it over to Alex to just give an update on our East End culvert or East Main culvert award that we've just done in the last few days.
Good morning, everyone. Yes, good news in the capital spending department for a change. We
So positive.
we had budgeted for 650,000 to replace the culvert going across Main Street in the East End, just west of Maple Ave. We went through a few iterations of design with the design consultant, and we were actually able to come up with a design that avoids altering the water course and avoids removing the existing, one of the existing culverts going across the street that's concrete, which is actually in very good condition for what it is. We were able to realize some optimizations in the design that ended up saving us almost $200,000 from what's budgeted. And that's verified now. We had it tendered and our tender closed last week, and we're at this point, we're looking at a savings from what was budgeted of nearly $200,000. So that's good news. The low bidder was Bryson Developments. And Bryson Developments, for those of you who don't know, is the developer that's developing up the hill in the East End. So they're nearby with their equipment, and it was a good opportunity for them and good savings for the taxpayers of Wolfville.
Good news. Councillor Palmer.
So sorry to interrupt your report, but they're directly related to these. Okay, so now you're gonna leave one culvert. How big is the other culvert? The new culvert gonna be?
I'd have to look up the design off the top of my head. I can't give you the answer to that, but it is
At least 24 anyway, 36.
it's a concrete box culvert. It's over a meter wide. So it's quite large, and that will supplement the capacity of the existing concrete culvert. And both culverts will be closed in on either end with a new concrete head wall.
And when do you anticipate it being done?
In the contract, we asked them to be complete before the end of November.
My concern would be, and I think it would be the traffic flow for basically from now until, you know, the middle of October. We all know how backed up and crazy the town of Wolfville gets coming from the east end to go to that stop sign. So I'd be leery of, that's just a heads up on that. I mean, make sure that I don't know how long that project shouldn't take too long once they get at it.
It shouldn't take too long, and one of the stipulations of the contract is to maintain traffic flow through Main Street with at least one lane.
Yeah.
It'll be signalized, so cars will have to take turns going in either direction, like any bridge repair that you would see on the highway or on a rural road. It'll be the same thing, and it shouldn't take more than a couple months to get it done.
You anticipate doing that with a stoplight?
So it'll be up to the contractor to propose a flagging solution there, a temporary traffic solution, but it will have to be open to traffic in one direction, going back and forth at all times. So it'll either be with an automatic light or with full-time flagging while they're excavating.
Okay, thank you.
Alex, so you said it's just west of Maple. How far just west? So relative to the, and I have a follow-up question, relative to the Catholic Church, like just west or quite a bit?
Just west of Maple, just west of the Kenny property.
Okay, so kind of across from the Catholic Church or the big, whatever that big house that's been for sale forever?
It's right there, right now that there is a pylon.
Yes,
on the road.
so two questions. When we had the big rain a week or so ago, and Oak Street, houses at the bottom of Oak Street, but not just before you turn east on Oak Street, flooded. Will that eventually address that flooding problem?
Our Public Works Department is putting together a list of every issue that was reported during that last rainstorm, because it was a good snapshot of what needs attention in town. I believe actually Karen is working on that today, so I should be able to bring an info report to council with that information.
And the other issue was the resident who wrote us about the problems with the safety at that corner with the school bus. I'm just hoping that issue, at least during construction, is on staff and the developer's mind, because I assume the school bus will continue to come. So as I understand it, the children are crossing to the south side of the street, and there's a lot of traffic coming down Main Street, and there's a lot of bushes and so on. So just one more thing is going to probably make parents more worried.
The safety of that intersection will be addressed with the long-term capital project that will eventually take place on that section of Maple. In
Just
the
in the interim.
Yeah, in the interim, there are bushes that can be trimmed, so the stop sign is more visible. Basic maintenance items that we can do right now to make sure that's as safe as it can be until long-term solution is developed.
I don't know who was first, so I'm gonna go with Councillor McKay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the good news. It is good news. So, and so it is on the south side of the culvert, so that's in front of the Kenny farm.
I think it's my share.
By the Cook's house, in front of that, it's on that side. It's
The
on the south side. Where
the culvert goes across Main Street.
across Main Street.
Yeah.
That will fix the issue that's on the south side. Because that's where all that started, because in front of the Kenny farm and their neighbor, the Cooks, so that all fell apart. Right, yes, what I'm asking. Right. And my next thing was just going to be on communication one for the bus, and because I actually think they crossed north, but
Do they?
I think. But then if that is going to interrupt the traffic flow into downtown, we should be communicating with our businesses to let them know that that will be a definite change in pattern coming in from that. And especially if it's on the weekends when we have the Harvest Marathon, harvest season comes, our markets are full to the brim. And everything else that happens in October. And which is lots of fun, but
Beyond Maple, maybe we can direct up Maple and up to the ridge if you're going to the farm
Yeah.
markets.
something to consider. I'm sure you have it, but just in our minds to.
Yeah, at this point, we just issued the letter of award to the contractor yesterday, so we're waiting for a proposed construction schedule. Once we have that construction schedule, then we'll develop a communications plan.
Perfect, thank you.
Councillor Ingham.
Thanks, Alex. I'm glad to hear that we are doing an inventory on the culverts. I just would be remiss to not ask about the one at the bottom of Orchard that tends every time we have a heavy rain, it goes all the way down to Main Street, right? Is that one that you're looking at?
That one will also be on the list of locations that we're looking at, yes.
Okay. And so when you're saying that inventory is coming out today or fairly soon?
Well, I'm gonna have a list presented to me today. Our next step is gonna be mapping everything in our GIS, so we can assess everything from like a big picture perspective and kind of understand which of these issues are co-related, and to try and prioritize an approach to upgrades and to repairing what needs to be repaired.
Just with the climate and everything like that and the pending storm that's brewing, I mean, it's really hard to walk around. People are getting really, really nervous, right? People have had a lot of flooding in the basement. So I'm hoping that we get on top of some of this so people don't have flooding in their basements all the time and whatnot. So thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
Still good news.
Still good news. Still good news.
Good news on the savings, more to come on the communications. Yeah, just a couple other things. Our Welcome Week event on Labor Day was a great success. So thank you to all the staff that were involved in that and the council coming up. Yeah, no, I think it was really well received. So we'll continue to do that. That seems like it will become a signature annual event in partnership with Acadia. So nice to see that turnout and nice to see the good weather for it. And just mentioning Hurricane Lee, and I know Dan is listening, as he said he can come over if anyone needs him. We are continuing to monitor, and Alex does have his public works and parks crews out doing as much proactive work as we can this week to prepare for that. We still don't know what the full outcome will be or how badly we'll be hit here, but we're trying to get ready just in case, because there will be some impact. We just don't know to what extent yet. So stay tuned, and everyone is, I think, on Dan's list. So you'll continue to get the updates as they come forward. So the next official one from the province will come tomorrow morning. Okay, that's it for me.
Are there any questions of council to the CAO about this or other things?
Go ahead. Thanks, Erin. You did mention that we had the open house with the landlords and the feedback will be coming to council. I have spoken to a few landlords that have reached out myself. Can you tell me like the feedback, just how many responded? How many responses did you get? Was it a good number of responses or?
Yeah, we had a healthy number of responses through Blooms, and Barb does have this summarized in a what we heard report. I don't have that right now. And I don't want to put Barb on the spot because I know she's written it up to come to council in the package, but we did get a healthy response on Blooms. We did an open house that had a number of people participate from the community and landlords. And then we did the targeted landlord session, which had a handful of landlords attend as well, and different ones that came from the open house that we did. So that was really the feedback streams that we have. So I think you'll get a good cross section of community and landlord feedback. Some mix, some of it not so mixed. So I think it'll be good for council to have take into consideration.
Thank you, Palmer.
I had this question asked me the other day and I didn't know the answer, so but we had all the people here would know the answers in front of us here. So the question I had was who on the East End property, the erosion control, who was in charge of telling the developer what to use and who's in charge of policing what they use?
Mike. So the erosion and sediment controls are regulatory requirements that basically start at the provincial level. The design engineer has to submit an erosion and sedimentation control plan to the town that abides by the provincial guidelines. We review it and we accept it or give them notes. And then it's up to our department to basically instruct them or order them to repair any deficiencies throughout the construction process.
Okay, all right, that answers my question. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just before we move on, I have a question about compliance, and I have received and I have forwarded these all on to Kate, and usually sometimes I've copied Alex. And I don't know if it happens in other areas of town, but certainly where I am, the vacant land, which is not part of the East End development, the people who own that land have not taken care of it. They've either not cut it, or recently, I don't know if this was a direction from compliance, they did cut it and they just left a mess all over the sidewalks. Now, my question is, we operate under a complaint process. So a resident, and what seems to happen is residents don't feel comfortable complaining. So after a week or so, they write me a nasty letter, or they might write you a nasty letter. And I have forwarded it on to Caden, and I'm quite happy to do this. But I recalled last night that several councils ago, there was an issue on Hillcrest. Hillcrest is the one at the far side. And Blair, the compliance officer at the time, was quite involved. It was a fairly serious situation. The resident who at the time lived across the road was terrified of retaliation. And so I put in a complaint on their behalf. This was something that could have gone in a legal process. And I remember, Aaron, you telling me that because I had been the complainant, should that come to council, I would have had to recuse myself. So now I'm a little more sensitive about, I don't mind passing information on to Caden, but but that may put me or any of you, if you became the complainant, in an awkward situation should that landowner come back, and it should come back to council. In my doing my good work as a constituency work, I would not be able to be part of that discussion. So I feel it's a bit of a catch-22, and I'm not looking for an answer today, but it is a situation. We know whether I get lots of calls I've had calls from international parents whose children are living in unsafe situations, apartment living situations. I give them the process. I give them Caden's information. They're afraid to respond. in this case, they didn't give me the address, but had they done it and had, I'm always prepared. I was always prepared to take that, to be the complainant, just to get it so that somebody would be safe. But I understand our protocol, and maybe this is just something for now that all council should know. If you are the complainant and it does come to council, then you have to recuse yourself. And I don't understand why that should be. So maybe you could explain that. Because it leaves us with residents who are fearful to come out for reprisals, counselors who may be willing to carry the water for that, but then find that should it come to council, they got to leave the room. So it doesn't make sense to me.
So I think everything is really case specific. So if you see something in town that requires attention, maybe from a minimum property standards perspective or dangerous and unsightly, you can bring it forward to Caden and he can start that process to look into it. I think where it gets dicey, and I can't recall all the details of 2 councils ago with that one situation, is that if something is appealable to council. So for example, if we were ever going to order a property to be demolished, as an example, if the counselor was the one championing that and the complainant, it's very difficult to then sit on this side as you're more or less acting as a jury in that case, right? You have judicial review, but those haven't really been plentiful. Like we haven't really had any of those issues come in front of council in the last couple of terms. So I think what I would say is that if you're hearing concerns from your residents that are hesitant to pass it on, send it to us anyway. Caden can follow up. And if we do need to have a resident serve as the official complainant, then Caden can work with any of those affected residents to talk to them about that. Because sometimes, yes, we do need them and we do need them to stand behind their complaint, but often 95% of the time, like that wouldn't be an issue. But
so I'm wondering do our park staff, once a season, because the place, it is a mess. It's the sidewalk on Carriageway and Olson where they've just cut down garbage like that. And it's people, it's an accessibility issue, frankly. There's a woman in on the street who has a walker. It's unsafe for her to walk down the street because of the basically straw and other weeds that have just been left on the street. Property owners tend not to do that. Everywhere else on that street, people have cut their lawns and they've whippersnipped and they've cleaned up their property, but absentee developers seem to just, get the grass cut. Maybe someone told them to cut the grass and walk away. So do our staff not, Caden or somebody walk around and say, this is an infraction?
so typically we are complaints based because we don't have the resources to send Caden or our park staff out to just assess what's happening in town like fully on a regular schedule. So we tend to go by complaints basis. So if we are made aware that there's an area of concern, we are pretty good at following up on that fairly expeditiously. So that's been our process. That's our policy. And that's why we have complaints based approach, because we are limited in our resources.
Even from us, even from counselors could put in that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And not find themselves. It's the appeal, but.
Yeah, and that
each of
would
those
be-
could be, so, it creates an awkward situation for council. I would like maybe to have that as further discussion at some, maybe budget, if it's staff. If it's a staff capacity, I just think it's very hard for residents to make complaints. Now, I mean, one simple thing, I was talking to a resident who said she discovered that there's a form, and she also put in a complaint on the form, but we don't, I think it would be helpful for council. I know Devin, when he comes to PAC, will give us, it's not a list of building permits. Not something we make a decision on it, but at least we have an awareness. So I think it would be helpful for council to know complaints were made in your neighborhood, and you're probably aware of it, but just to know that it's on the docket. I'm wondering if that's something we could take under advisement.
I think that, yeah, I mean, we can definitely look at ways that maybe we can provide more information around what types of complaints are coming forward. If you wanted to raise our service level, that we had staff on a regular basis going out through town and assessing areas to follow up on, say, the minimum property standards, we probably would need more resources. We don't have them, and that's why we go on a complaints basis and we kind of prioritize from that. The appeal to council, there's only certain things that are appealable to council where there is that judicial role. Oftentimes when a complaint comes in, there isn't that role for council. So we just deal with it as staff. It's just those times through the dangerous and unsightly piece, like if we were going to order demolition is the one that comes to mind, that you would have a role. And those are really few and far between. We haven't had a demolition order under my watch. I know there was a couple right before I came in, but that was 9 years ago. So they're not frequent. But yes, if it was going to be something of that magnitude, you probably don't want to be the complainant as a counselor. If you notice that there's some lawn mowing that needs to happen on a private property and you want to bring it to our attention, that's likely not going to get appealed to council. We can follow up on that as staff fairly expeditiously. But the more proactive you want us to be, I have 1.5 compliance officers that are focusing on.
Totally understand that.
Yeah, so that's.
I think it's for council, for me, there are a couple of things for council to just be in the loop of where the complaints are coming from our residents, because frankly, the number of people that come into my office that don't understand that I cannot direct this group out there to do it. People just don't understand that. And so they think, well, you got the form, why didn't you make it happen? And it's often, I don't even know that they put it, I never know. So a process to know and what's going to happen. And I think just for me, at some point, I would like to have a discussion. All members of council, in addition to making policy, end up doing constituency work, some more than others. I know that there are some of you who can't walk your dog without getting complaints. And you know, it's a kind of a gray area for members of council. And I mean, I guess just a sensitivity for staff even to know that whether we want to or not, we end up playing that role, and it might not be our formal role, but it's the role we play. So that's my concern. And maybe we can chat offline and see if there's a way during the budget process or just, it just may mean systems in place so that we are not unaware that complaints have come in.
Yeah, and we can think about how best to do that. A lot of the complaints that come in through the town council email or come in through that function. There are a few that come through the website that we draw attention to, but for the most part, it comes through that. So there is that awareness. As I mentioned, I think through email a couple of weeks ago, if you're receiving complaints from residents and you're forwarding them to staff, send them to me too, so that I have that awareness so that we can ensure that they are followed up on. But there might be some easier ways to kind of manage that. We did try to do a sample, I guess, tracking system a while ago just to start logging complaints, and it didn't really take off through the mayor's office. So there might be some kind of modified version of that we can do. But for now, to tell the residents that website form is available, that's a really helpful thing that goes. Barb has some awareness and touches that. So there's some oversight to make sure that
Maybe
we
even just
follow up.
to tell us, I didn't know
Yeah.
that existed until the resident said she found it. Just a little more communication around that. I get calls on my landline and people often laugh and they say, I don't know how I got you. I wasn't calling the mayor, but here then I get their complaint. So I don't know if there's something with the phone tree that they think they're calling. I don't know, but I get lots of those calls and then they just say, well, okay, I'm going to start with you. All right. Thank you.
I just wanted to.
Yes.
I just wanted to follow up on the comment about people having reservations and fearful, because my experience, and I believe this is true, that all complaints are kept confidential. And so I think if that's something that we should stress to residents, is that they should not be fearful of a complaint. I think if somebody assumes that somebody has complained, that they have no evidence to blame the complaint on anyone. And any experience that I've had with the town has been that confidentiality has always been maintained rigorously. And so I think residents should feel comfortable making complaints and not fear that they're going to somehow be hurt or if that happens.
Those fears often come, and Barb has a presentation shortly from international students who come from a different culture, a different world, and a lack of trust that just because I say it's confidential, they don't necessarily buy that it is. That's not their world experience. So it's something to be aware of, particularly around people new to the country or international students.
Yeah, and just on that, I mean, yeah, we had that discussion before, and certainly staff maintain confidentiality. Where it may come into play is we can always be FOI popped. And so that's just something to be aware of, which can include details around a complaint. And if a complaint ever ends up in court, so I'm thinking of any SOTs, for example, that are issued through our nuisance party bylaw, where it's a resident that brings forward the complaint, they may be called to be part of that process. And those are really the two instances where someone that's made a complaint might get drawn out a little bit more publicly than they're comfortable. I think Caden does a pretty good job of making sure that, you know, folks are aware of that, but also that we try to minimize that, you know, we are very confidential when someone comes forward with a complaint. But I just wanted to ensure that there are those opportunities where those names might end up being in the public realm.
Okay, thank you. Shall we do the active transportation and then take a break? That'd be good. Okay, Devin. So info report, these are staff reports for discussion. Info report, read the AT network update.
Good morning. Maybe we could do you mind if we did the next two items? Just because
Sure.
I was gonna go to another meeting.
Okay,
I could just do them back to back.
Sure.
I don't know how to get to the presentation. That one.
Development agreement, Paddingstone.
Hold on. I was just told over coffee, so. Yeah. You serve some. I'm sorry.
Okay, I've been wanting to bring this item back and just to jump to the last slide. We probably will bring some updates over the next few meetings as this moves forward. But just so everyone's aware, because this has been going on for a few years and we actually haven't been able to talk about it much. Other duties as assigned.
Oh my.
I'm listening.
I'll give it, it's 1 second. It's okay.
Did you want some to? But thank you so much, Director McLean.
That might be. Okay, so we had a financial update on this recently, and I assume everyone remembers that. So this is really building on that to have a little bit more of a discussion and an update on what this may look like as we roll this out, going out to 2027. So the key here is we had a certain amount of money budgeted with the federal and provincial contributions. We're going to be spending approximately $3 million on active transportation going out to 2027. So if we want to get all of that money, we actually have to execute the projects. So that's the really important part. So I've shown this slide before, and it's becoming much more real as we get to implementing this funding. So at a staff level, we've been thinking about this, and I would, not that we need to have the answers to this today, but I would really challenge you all to also think about this, because I do think some of the experience we've had around Highland Avenue and other sort of change management that we do in the town, the communication and the way that we do it to build a culture around these investments, I think is critical. We're trying to think of better ways to socialize the projects early and make people feel part of the process. But at the same time, sorry, my phone's ringing. At the same time, this is a little bit unlike some other projects where these projects are funded, approved, and are happening. So we often go out and ask people, do you want us to do project A? It's a different message where this project is happening, and how can we make people feel part of that? So we have been identifying a bit of a volunteer implementation group, just some key folks in town. If you know of people, maybe just shoot me an email if you have a suggestion. I think that would be a few years of involvement, and people can come and go. I've already been tapping some of those people I know in the community, and sending them in the material, getting feedback, which has been very helpful. So just keep this in mind. I think this stuff is really critical. Barb's been involved, but we're just getting ramped up. So I just want to go quickly and remind everyone, so it's in everyone's mind what we're doing. So the province and the federal government supported our application, I think mostly because we were presenting an actual network of active transportation investments and not just a one-off. A lot of this stuff is done in a piecemeal fashion, and people wonder, why is this path here? It doesn't go anywhere. So we really had put quite a bit of work into thinking about the network, and I won't go into all the background reports, but there's been a number of those done. So the projects are split up into a couple of different categories. The main, perhaps safest investments that we're looking to make are Main Street East and West, coming in and out of the downtown and along Skyway and Pleasant. So moving people from east to west through town. Highland's on there. It's not as prominent. It's not part of the funding. And Maple Avenue is on there. It's also not part of the funding. So I'm only showing on this map the projects that we are committed to carrying out as part of this funding. There are many other things that we need to do in the realm of active transportation, but this is where we landed in this funding envelope. So I'm just going to go through these fairly fast. This is in the package. We can have other discussion about details, but these are conceptual drawings of some of the projects and how they would be looked to be implemented. So on Main Street, east and west, we have a bike lane on either side. Certainly I receive complaints about different aspects of those bike lanes. I'm sure you do as well. So one of the recommendations that we received, and I think Director McLean was part of this idea as well, but just to give some credit there, but it's so moving that facility onto one side of the street creates a safer condition and a bit more room, particularly for older folks and for children. So the focus here is to move the needle on safety and comfort. Those are really the two main metrics that we're trying to focus on. Up at Skyway and Pleasant, we have a bit more room in the right of way. Obviously on Main Street, there's a lot of considerations, a lot of infrastructure, and the budget just isn't there. In an ideal world, we're rebuilding all of these things, but obviously we can't do that. So these are retrofit projects. This is along Skyway and Pleasant. There is more room. There are some constraints. So you may see these facilities like we've seen on Highland, have to take those considerations into effect. So this is a separated walking and biking facility that is being proposed up at the top of town. Obviously, the downtown is a little more complicated. We took out the section in the main business district through Main Street, so that yellow line. But one of the first projects that we want to look at that we're actually moving toward trying to get done this year is paving the Harvest Moon Trail. So that red box that you see at the top of the slide from Harborside to the farmers market. And another key project is getting people from Highland to the Harvest Moon Trail. So you can see that to the left of the slide going around the Festival Theater. Some of the other projects in here, particularly going to the East End Gateway, we didn't include those in the funding just for everyone's information, because there will be another major project there when we get to our flood risk work that needs to be done in the next few years. I'm just going to show a couple of these, but there's a number of projects in the funding that we've called connectors, and some of them go to the Harvest Moon Trail and some of them go to other key assets like the Wolf Hill School. So this is one of the projects. This is, again, a project that we hope to have completed this year that's being designed. Hopefully we're moving to tendering that. This is another just safe passage to Wolf Hill School from Highland. A big focus of Highland was creating that space, that extra space for children to move to and from the elementary school. There's another category of project, and one of the tools of this has been recently put on Sterling Avenue. So these large speed cushions, is that the right terminology? Speed cushions. So that will be one tool, but all of the streets are a bit different that we've identified in this category of shared streets. And again, the focus is work with the context, trying to improve safety and accessibility on those sections. All of those shared streets that are identified, those have been identified since the very first active transportation plan that was done for the town that we reviewed. So some of this stuff is really long overdue. But again, it's trying to communicate to all users of the rights of way that people have different needs and some different facilities, signage, paint markings, speed cushions. These are the types of tools where we're not making a more costly intervention on the streets. There's a lot of sidewalk work, obviously, over the next number of years. The funding focused just on two. So Victoria has been talked about for a number of years. So this will be partially funded through this ISIP funding, going to King Street from Main Street, as you can see, going past our rec center. And the other small section is just along Harborside and Front, where there just isn't a sidewalk connecting that. So we hope as part of paving this section of the trail, the sidewalk connection can also be completed as with that scope of work. So this is just clipping out of the report, but just to remind people, and I've alluded to this throughout, this is where we're trying to focus right now. We do have a bit of a rush on, and so we probably will come back with another update as to what the scope of the year one projects will be. We do need to show the funder that we are doing something. In the initial year of the funding, with the delay in the funding announcement and just the timing of this, it's been a challenge. So Alex and I and others have been working on this, and that's our focus right now. Other pieces of that are working on branding and communications. We've been meeting with Barb and others. We've tasked consultants with doing some work around finishing Highland in terms of painting and signage, and having a consistent approach throughout the network. So if they're moving between surfaces, they still know that they're on this, what we hope will be a high service level network. And just the last point here is there will be updates through the CAO report. Hopefully people will start talking about this. Hopefully the funding signage will be going up, and other announcements that we can make to make this exciting and positive, like as it should be. I think that's it. That's just an abridged version of the bigger package that is in the agenda.
Questions? Councillor Ingham.
Thanks, Devin. I guess I just want to reiterate like how the safety feature comes into that, and you did mention that a few times. With the younger children, the parents are concerned, can I send them off to school and are they going to be safe? For somebody like me who's biking, it's like I'm biking on the trail. Do I feel safe with somebody coming up behind me? So we have these two demographics that want to feel safe. Is there any way, and I know we talked about this when we went on before Highland was completed, we talked about maybe doing like a safety program to the kids, maybe take them out to Highland and maybe somebody going into the school, because if parents are feeling safe that their kids are going, so it's like a mindset, and we want to start the mindset off with the younger children, right? Because this is how we're going to go on. So I'm thinking if we could go into the school, maybe somebody, looking at Nick over there, has a program, this is how we're safe on the trails. And but it's safe for all, because as Jody knows, being on trails and myself, you know, they really promote the courtesy down the trail. So, you know, just some rules to go over and maybe make people feel more safe. And so if it was a staff led something, or maybe you wanted to go in, I'm happy to go in too, to talk to some of the kids and sort of promote it, and maybe even have like a bike day, like instead of, I think schools have walk to school day, maybe it's bike day, but I think it's basically, it's the safety in there. And so that's a big one that I can think of to sort of promote the active transportation as we move forward.
It's a great idea. It's something that has been mentioned. Luke was someone else that was really keen on getting out and doing some of this programming. So I think we can bring back some of these programming ideas and make sure we're all on the same page. I think we all need to get together. I'm looking at Barb. We started some pieces, and then we've had other workload that have taken over a bit. So we'll get back on it and start communicating a bit more with what's coming.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. Outside of these specific projects, I just want to ask your long-term vision. Because several times this summer, I felt exceedingly unsafe walking through the downtown with my dog, because there were teenagers on bicycles roaring down the sidewalk. And, you know, treating it like a race or a challenge because of all the patios. And that's the complaint that I get the most, is around the downtown. So looking into the future, what do you see?
We decided not to look at the downtown as part of this. And I think there's a really large capital project at some point that involves Main Street. That's to be determined. How the roadway is shared between users is probably a decision to be made at that time when we're getting into the design. And I think people biking on the sidewalk, it's a problem, an enforcement issue. I hear from people on the trail as well. Some sections of the trail are very narrow, especially further down towards Grand Pre. And so this is the courtesy, I think, to Jen's point. I think there's a culture of courtesy and safety that needs to be built that's not necessarily as prevalent here as other places that have more of a cycling and active culture. So I think it's something we can all be part of, cultivating in the community. Yeah.
Councillor Palmer and then Councillor McKay.
Actually, it wasn't going to be the question, but now that Councillor Elliott brought it up, so we have a bylaw that says no bikes on sidewalks, don't we? Period. That's the
Under
statement.
a certain, like, children can be on sidewalk.
Children can be.
It's under a certain 16, under 16. Oh, I thought it was the size of the bike wheel. Provincially, I could.
Oh, and you're right. The time we had the discussion, and it might be updated, it was anyone that's 16 and under is legally allowed to drive on the side.
Well, they could demolish.
Yeah, well, 16 is pretty old. Who owns a Harvest Moon Trail?
It's a gentleman who lives in the US.
Still is. So you're planning on paving his property?
Yeah, we've been talking to him about this. Yes.
And Katie is okay with you using their side of the rink or the old
They've been on board, including with Highland. This is part of what Alex and I are working towards is we need to give them the detailed drawings. So we're just getting drawings back and then working through that, but there hasn't been any indication that we won't be able to do that. Yeah.
Mr. McKay?
Thank you. I've got a few questions if I can. I agree on the safety thing. I think that's always been a pet peeve of mine. So figuring out how to navigate the spaces. Because people don't use them unless they feel safe. So it is about changing the mindset for sure. If it's dangerous to go through the downtown, I really like that the Harvest Moon Trail will be the first thing we pave because we could do really good communication and signage to get off or go down by Clock Park and go to HMT and then come back up the other side because it will be paved as well. So it's the communication and the signage piece. I think Highland needs that too. I think the kids don't know how to use that. So figuring, making the spaces evenly going around, like say, consistent from place to place. When we look at Acadia Street and going from Highland on to there, how is that proposed to be done? Because there is a large number of children who are, we have buses now, but there's still a large number of children who are dropped off, which is unfortunate. I think walk and bike is October actually at the school. So a good time to get in maybe is right previous to that. But it's so dangerous when you come around that corner. The sidewalk is only so wide. Bikes are coming down and kids are on their bikes. All great stuff, but it needs to be wider and bigger. And then you've got parents dropping off their kids and opening car doors. So it is super dangerous. Have we ever considered there is a bus drop off that goes in and around it? Have we ever thought about putting in a drop off like somewhere else where your parents had to go in and go around and just didn't put parking on that side and just put lanes? Because it's super dangerous.
We've thought about that one a lot, and we thought about trying to make it a year one project. And Alex and I stood there with Elaine, who's from Design Point, the consultant, and we thought this is really complex.
Yeah.
There's also power poles there on that side. And so we're thinking about doing some camera work there and monitoring some of that so the design consultant can really understand the situation. And we did look at the other drop off as well. Yeah, and to be honest, I think all of us agree that that was a really big priority, is to show the utility of Highland with the school. But and hopefully that can happen soon. But we didn't want to rush it because all of the things that you said are very important, and we want to get it right when we're investing there.
Okay. Yeah. On Skyway. When we develop that, not unlike Highland, so I walk Skyway a fair amount, walking the dog to Reservoir Park. So there is a grass space between the sidewalk and the street that often, at this time of year, it's long. So when we look at doing that, will it be just a street, a curb, and then pavement? Because I'm not sure if you walk up along that side, but it's not often maintained as often as it could be. And I'm assuming that's us, which I was going to bring up, but it's not a huge deal. But when we look at doing those things, do we look at that as well?
Yeah, so that corridor has 3 or 4 different conditions on it. And we're looking at each one sort of separately. I can't, it's a bit early to say because we haven't gone into detailed design. One thing I should say that I didn't mention is what we're hoping to do once we get through these year one projects is we'd really like to get into designing all of the projects that are in this funding window so that people can understand the detailed design. We can start communicating with people where there's sort of bigger change happening, particularly with front lawns. And so, yeah, I think some of that will come in the months ahead as we get into designing all of those.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I've had also numerous complaints about the speed on Pleasant and in particular. It's it's terrific. I think, and I had one person contact me, I think 4 or 5 times. So I think he did go in to see Travis at the RCMP as well, because to see if we can do something there, but something to consider along that street as well. When we do this, are we also going to put in? I mean, sometimes we do with these and we kind of come in as we have this funding and this is what we have. We also have a parks plan and we have other things happening, and our crosswalk safety thing has been, because we've seen that a few times, and how to evaluate all those. So when we come together at budget time, are we going to be sitting down, having a really holistic discussion on, these are the parks we're going to be working on, these are the transportation things we're going to be getting there? Are we putting in more bike racks? Are we putting in e-bike charging stations? Are we putting in, are the crosswalks safe to get there? It's such a big, I mean, it's active transportation, but it's so much more than just active transportation to connect people to the things they need to go to. So I love it. I love all of them that go together, but I don't like piecemealing things together because I feel like something gets missed. You know, you don't really think it all the way through. So I like that, Devin, that you're thinking about designing the whole thing out or what they might look like. And then as we see the parks come online, these are the things you're going to be going to. You're going to go to football here. You're going to have hammocks at waterfront, all of the things that are coming around, which are all wonderful things for our residents to do. But having that picture and the buy-in just becomes so much bigger because you have this, you know, grandiose vision of what the space is going to look like. And it's so much, it's more exciting, it's more fun, people buy it more. I think that the mindset has a tendency to change when you have something big to look at. I know that's how I feel, but so some of the things that were just for me were crosswalks, putting in all those extra infrastructure, making sure everything is kept you know, cohesive and safe. And Victorians and on site, sorry, my note went back to here, because that one was back on, we've discussed that. Ooh, I don't know, a number of times. Going up to Rotary Park. And when is that being done and what was that to look at? Because I think it was Tim who had agreed to go look at it back in the first really space, and I don't know that much
Something
change.
happening today, the sidewalk, I guess. Sidewalk
The
is
sidewalk is going in.
today.
Yeah.
I can speak to the sidewalk on Victoria. Where Victoria is kind of in an uncertain location in terms of year in the capital investment plan. We decided to go forward with our remaining asphalt operational dollars this year to repair the sidewalk on Victoria, so it's not a safety issue any longer. And that's happening now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's torn up. And then does that take into consideration the parking? So it's just the sidewalk?
Just the sidewalk for the immediate safety issues for now, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, did that make sense? Okay.
Councillor Butler.
Mine will be quick. It's sort of to feed off of Councillor McKay's thing. Some of my favorite slides of yours, Devin, because I sit at home every night and I look at previous slides from your presentations, are those ones of the street and the progression of how our streets have been done with the colors. So this year it was like this, and this is what needed to be worked on. Then you go to the 5 years and the colors have now changed to show what we've done. So just sort of were those your slides? Who's ever they were.
No,
they were beautiful.
those are, that's work that Trevor does and Mike
Okay,
uses those mostly in the budget.
I love
presentation.
those because it shows the progression of we had this in the plan and now it's done and this is what we're working on. So
Sidewalk condition index or pavement condition index.
So
we-
I sort of see what Councillor McKay was saying. So this is year one, and then you just in 2 years you lay over, and now there's this added to the same plan, the exact same, and then another year, and this is what's going to be added. I kind of liked that visual of this is where we're at, and then every year we just keep adding more on, so that eventually it is just one complete plan. I just had that in my head. One thing I did want to ask about one of your slides. There's a couple of statements it's page 30 in our package, where it says only 2% of Wolfville residents commute by bike and 22% by walking. And then 40, there's a couple other ones. Can you go into some detail? Only 2% of Wolfville residents commute. Is that just recreational, or is that they have chosen to use their bike over their car? 2%, that number, it baffled me that only 2%, just the amount of bikes I see out. I'm assuming it's just purely recreational. It is not actually, they're using their bike because they've chosen that as their main form of transportation.
Yes, yeah, I think you've
Okay.
answered your question.
That's sad. Okay, just thought I'd throw that in there.
More people have bikes, but they're using it as their transport.
Yeah, they're just getting on, they're just going for a recreational, but then going home, getting in their car, coming in to pick up, going into town to get their groceries and then going home. Okay, that was sad.
Counselor. Or Mercedes. Counselor Palmer.
Well, it's sort of sidebar. It's not exactly to do with Devon's report, but Jody brought it up. Jody brought it up, so I'm gonna expand on it. Can the CAO please ask the RCMP to issue more speeding tickets in this town? Because it is, when's the last time anybody saw any RCMP officer issuing a speeding ticket in this town? I've never seen one.
Even patrol.
Well, but issuing a ticket in Maple Avenue was atrocious. And it's, what did we do to solve the problem? We put speed bumps out. And I think we had to put them up. Yeah, we had to put a few cop cars up there for a couple of times a day. It would have probably done the same effect.
Apparently
Anyway, that's
5 in the morning is a good time because they're now racing to bang on and kind of catch air on the speed bump.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, just two things on that. I can get Travis to give a bit more specific detail at the RCMP advisory board on just number of speeding tickets that have been issued. And some of that even may be part of the GDPRM presentation this afternoon when we're talking about the different calls and infractions. But the other thing is Travis has been really responsive to going out and upping patrols in different areas. So noting Skyway, I can pass that along too, but I've seen how responsive he is when there's a certain area in town that's been identified by a councillor or resident. So if you do have areas that you're noticing increased speeds, let me know and we'll pass them on and they will go down.
Councillor McKay.
Thank you. As I believe Alex, or Director D'Souza, sorry, you have plans to put 4-way stops somewhere on that street too, correct? But coming in the opposite direction, so coming into town, maybe you can tell where those are.
4-way stops, the plans for 4-way stops are at Gasbro and Pleasant, Highland and Pleasant, Grandview and Skyway, and University and Skyway.
Right.
University and Skyway is a 3-way stop, but that's where we're putting the all-way stops this year.
This year. Good.
Yeah.
Okay. I wasn't sure if everybody was aware of that either. We had a sidewalk discussion. That's why I was bringing it up. And we talked about painting lines on Main Street for parking. How are we doing with our training of our line painting person?
The line painting has been delayed numerous times this year because of weather. You'll probably notice we couldn't even get our commercial contractor in here this year until just recently, just within the last couple of weeks. So we've had a lot of challenges with weather and with learning curve with the equipment and the materials. So we're a little behind this year, unfortunately, but we're trying to get as much done before the winter as we can.
Thank you. Probably wasn't that.
Does that finish your active transportation presentation, Devon? So you want to take us on to the Teddingstone EA?
I'm just gonna go through the presentation and I just have to be somewhere at 11, so I'll do the presentation and then Lindsay, maybe you can come up and join me if there's questions. So we've been taking a development agreement through the process for the Teddingstone Inn. Some of you will be familiar with this. So the application is for a new building, a 2-story building to house 7 more guest suites. So all of our inns are busy in town. If you've talked to any of the operators, and this is sort of trying to meet demand. The property is within a design guidelines area and a registered heritage property. So coming out of planning, they often wear two hats, sort of thinking about this from a heritage perspective and as the planning committee. So this is really the motion that committee of the whole is considering, a positive motion from the planning advisory committee. This did also go to the design review committee. So this has been a number of months getting to this point, and after this meeting, the motion is to move this on to a public hearing. There was some fulsome discussion, and this property has been at design review committee with a few fits and starts. They had a couple other proposals they were thinking about doing that we actually took to the committee, and then they've sort of come around. This is their kind of last proposal. The owners say they're kind of building out the site and finishing the site with this one. So there was some suggestions made from the committee about the positioning of the building, and particularly the face of the building that faces Main Street. That's often a big part of our discussion at Design Review Committee. We're trying to have East and West Main Street maintain a certain integrity. So that's often the focus. The applicant has responded to some of these with some more detail, similar to the main building, around the pillars, around the roof line. And at the end of the day, there's a couple different approaches to this. But at the end of the day, this owner is really looking to mimic the main building, which is the main registered heritage asset on the site, both from materials and style, and you've seen them do that with all of the improvements that they've made to the site. This is just going quickly through what the proposal is. So this is the existing site. Everyone's very familiar with the Tatting Stone. This is a little bit more of an updated site plan. So you can see this is really the finished product that they're hoping to get to, including the landscaping along Main Street. This building, once they actually finish the landscaping, will also be a bit buffered by some of that. And really they're focusing on their customer experience in that courtyard between the buildings. So this is the elevation facing Main Street. Again, similar to the main building. This is facing the rear. No one will really see this other than their clients. This is from the dining room, looking out. So again, a lot of detail that we discussed. Things like the decorative corbels are being added to have a bit more of an impact from a heritage perspective. Again, there's different schools of thought around new building that looks old. So we could talk about that for a while, but this is the approach that's being taken here. And then this is facing west towards 628 Main Street. So we do, this is consistent with our planning documents, and it has gone through a process. This is a great project for the town, for the owner, for visitors to the town. So the motion is here, and with that, I'm just gonna make my exit, and Lindsay's gonna come up and answer any questions.
I'll ask the deputy mayor to put the motion on the floor, and we'll get the motion on the floor, and then we can have some questions. Deputy mayor.
I would move that the committee of the whole recommend that the development agreement for 620 Main Street, PID 55383137, be forwarded to, this is a public hearing,
A seconder, please. Councillor Ingham, questions of Lindsay, comments to Lindsay. Are you ready, Lindsay? Yeah. Councillor Elliott.
I just want to check on the ownership of the piece of land to the far west of this site, covered in trees. Who owns that?
Who's the neighbor? Like who owns the?
Yeah, like that, just that section of trees. Is that owned by the inn?
Well, they would own up to the property line that's shown on the site plan.
Right,
So
it comes right to that.
Yeah. Do you want me to bring up the site plan here? We can
Sure.
just to take a look. This is a new site plan that was just submitted yesterday. So the red line is the property line here. So there is it's hard to gauge the size on a
it's hard
site
to
plan.
see.
This building, I should say, is about the same dimension as the existing inn, bar the new addition to the dining room that they've put on. It's 2,000 square feet. So it's a bit difficult to put yourself on the land from a site plan, but as you can see here, there's still quite a big distance between the property line and the proposed building. Exactly that dimension. Actually, I think it's on here. I can't read from that size, but I can certainly follow up with you on that.
Well, I just don't know if it's developable or yeah, would there be a conflict of interest there or not?
Well, they would be, James has done several site visits to the location, and this is what they have come to after several sort of renditions
Mhm.
based on the applicant's initial wants.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there's no issues.
Not that I can speak to, no.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor? Oh, sorry. Oh, you don't have your Counselor Elliott?
No, sorry, I just,
Any other questions? That's okay.
I'm just curious what Counselor, are you asking if the tree line is staying? Or if you were going to be developing it?
did the inn own it or somebody else?
Oh, and I don't know the answer. I was just curious why that was.
We want trees. We want trees.
Yeah, yeah.
Except when there are fires. Okay, no other questions? I call the question. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye, opposed, so that does go forward to a public hearing. And I understand, Lindsay, you're going to do the next information report on the Hemlock Woolly Adelgid interim update. How you get your stripes?
Exactly. Yeah, this is a very brief update on the Hemlock Woolly Adelgid. So in July, a resident and president of Blomidon Naturalist Society, Soren Bondrup Nielsen, provided a presentation to council. He had identified the Hemlock Woolly Adelgid, which is an invasive insect that kills hemlock trees here in Wolfville along a tree stand in the Millennium Trail area. So since then, staff have had communication with Soren as well as staff at the provincial level and with Peter Dunker, who is conducting the tree inventory for the town, just sort of looking for guidance on next steps and what our best move forward is. So they have advised for us to do 2 inventories, which have graciously been offered through the Blomidon Naturalist Society for no cost to do first, which would be if it's the will of council, they can do this pretty soon afterwards, which would be an inventory of hemlock trees in the woodland areas in town. We know through Peter's inventory that they aren't really on our streetscape area. So the inventory would be focused on woodland areas. And then in late winter, early spring, when conditions are favorable for identifying the Adelgid, they would go out again and do a inventory for which trees are infected with the pest. Following that, we would bring information back to council and we would include information whether we are advised to proceed with any sort of treatment or not, what the cost associated with doing those treatments might be. The insecticides do have to be administered by a licensed professional. So there certainly are costs associated with that. So we would bring information based on that and the approach that's recommended by the Blomidon Naturalist Society as well. So there'll be a separate RFD for your consideration. And if it's your will, we would proceed with the treatment plan. Additionally, some communications is being considered by staff for privately owned hemlock trees. Because they're not included in the woodland areas and in the inventory, but there may be some instances of them. So we want to be able to share information on what private property owners might be able to do. So today, really what we're looking for is just direction to move forward with those inventories at no cost with the Plummeted Natural Society.
Good deal.
Yeah, that's a good deal.
Do we need a motion? Do we have a motion? Just direction. Is that the pleasure of council? What, good pinch hitting. And I'm sorry, I did promise a break after Devon. But I just,
That's really good.
but Mike had already brought you coffee, so I didn't know if you still needed it. Okay, let's take oh, it's hot in here. Well, I'm not hot, but yeah, I could take my jacket off. All right, 10-minute break. Back back. We're back. Welcome back. And I understand the CAO is doing the parks master and open space master plan update.
So this is an information report, and you should have the comments that I had made to the report. I think initially there was an older version of the report that went in the agenda package. So Laura sent around the updated one yesterday. So a couple key things. So the team has circled back with a consultant to just nail down a timeline to move us forward and wrap up the parks planning process over the coming months. It's slid a little bit in terms of timing, and you can see that in the report, we've kind of gone through what we can expect to happen sort of between now and the holiday break, then the holiday break in April, where we hope to have the final report in front of council for final approval. There's some more engagement that needs to happen, and we wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to do that. And then there'll be work sort of after the holidays to really get down to the granular detail of each park and what that's going to look like with the costing. So with that, there are a couple milestones that we didn't want to miss as part of this year's budget process that I just want to draw attention to. You'll note that in our current 10-year plan, after year 3, I believe it is, we have a placeholder amount of $200,000 a year, with the exception of a couple of years when we have some significant other capital projects on the books that we need to not spend maybe the $200,000 a year. But that's been our placeholder amount. We are going to do some work with Rob and the consultants sort of as we go into the early first blush capital budget to see, is that the right number? Do we need to start building in a bit more capacity and maybe increasing that for version 1? So that's something we're going to do. We're going to bring back an RFD on pickleball on its own, either in October, November at the latest. We're aiming for October to come back with information recommendations around location, around the size, so that council can give direction and make some decisions so we can get it designed, so we can actually move forward with it in 2024. I know it's been one of the key projects that council wanted to do. And if we leave it until April, we're not going to be able to design and have it built in that timeline. So we'll bring that as a one-off. And if you're not comfortable, you're not comfortable. You don't have to move it forward, but we're getting pretty close. That there's a couple locations that could go. Really need to figure out now, like what is the size? So we're building a facility for the future. It is a very growing sport. And even, you know, for example, the 6 courts that we were talking about a number of years ago may not be even big enough for what council will want. So, and we do want an opportunity to talk to the pickleball users in the community to inform that report and come back. So that will be a one-off that you'll see. And then going into February, when we're kind of getting to the final version of the budget, we do want to have enough information for you to nail down at least years 1 to 3 in terms of priority. We'll be far enough in the parks planning process to be able to do that. And then with the placeholder amount, we should be in pretty good shape. But then the next budget cycle with the first new council, we're hoping that we'll be able to populate out the full 10 years of the plan. So that's kind of where we are. I will note that for next fiscal year, so 24, 25, hard to believe I'm even saying that. Pickleball is intended, as per council's earlier discussions at last year's budget process, to be one of the key projects. And then the work at Reservoir that we had planned to do this year, we're not going to get it all done. So the washrooms, the shading, there was some other improvements. We intend for that to carry over so that we can finish up Reservoir, because that is really important, and it's something we'd hope to do this year, but we just haven't been able to get to that, and it's very likely that won't happen. So there may be others that you'll identify, but we'll be in pretty good shape, I think, for the priorities for at least next year and the years after that. So the report's there for your information. It kind of goes through who we still intend to talk to. We need to sit down and have some really good discussions with Acadia. That hasn't happened yet. We did have a really good facilitated discussion with our park staff last week. That was great to help inform, you know, on the maintenance side, but also to get their feedback. And I think that was a really welcome additional step that was made. So you can kind of see who we still intend to talk to when some of those key milestones are all wrapping up in a final report coming in April. So no, Nick, if you want to add anything to that, you've been in on the recent discussions. Yeah, you do. Just anyone that might be listening.
I was gonna give you cards.
Yeah, just meetings have been happening, and we have met with some pickleball users and have planned to continue those discussions. That we have a meeting booked with key Acadia stakeholders too. So I don't know if anyone has questions on things I could try to answer, I suppose.
That's good question. Yeah, Councillor Ingham, then Councillor McKay.
Go ahead. Yeah, okay. I just want to let you know that I've had really good feedback from the people using the courts up at Acadia and that they're full all the time. And some people that don't even have partners to play with, they just meet up and they're playing. So they seem to be really happy with it. And some of these people have never played pickleball before. So the feedback up there has been good this summer.
It has been a good temporary solution. The surface is not ideal for, especially for some people with any mobility issues. There's a bit of instability in the surface itself, but it has been a really positive kind of stopgap for the time being.
I was gonna say some of the same thing, like they, although hesitant at first, there was some of that, one court I think was a little less desirable than the others, but still got used, I think quite a bit. They had lots of drop-ins, people I know even just dropped in to learn and they welcomed everybody in. I actually got sent a really nice picture of some of them, the more seasoned players, and some Acadia students just popped up and said, can we come play? And they shared their gear and they had nice interactions and they were kept busy. And so it was really kind of a nice come together on that one. So even though it was a little bit hesitant at the beginning, it really did, I think, fill the void, even if it's temporary. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes, but I was happy to see the student and, older community, because these people were a little bit older, come together and have a good time together. So it was pretty neat.
That's a real positive thing for that location when you're talking to Acadia, because that's perfect. That's just what you want. Okay.
So thanks for making.
No more questions? Thank you. Good. No? Okay. Ms. Shaw.
Good morning, Council. Through Mayor Donovan to everybody here, including staff. I'm really happy to bring this proposal back before you. This has been a really interesting file to be working on, and the support of members of council and other staff and community members as well has kind of got this to be where we are today, which I think is a good spot. So hopefully you'll all agree by the end of this presentation. The presentation today is a little bit more for the benefit of the person watching at home. Maybe there are a couple, but also this will be an opportunity to answer some questions because I'm sure that you will have some. So this is really some background just to ground everybody into a good starting point. So we are here today to look at kind of an intentional approach towards equity, diversity, and inclusion. Across the sector, people are referring to EDIA, EDIAR, EDI, all these different kind of acronyms. So we are specifically looking at equity, diversity, and inclusion. And from all of the conversations that happened, inclusion is really the place where we want to land. So all of this work that we're talking about doing gets us as a team and our community into more of a space of inclusion. So equity is really about fair access and opportunity and support for all people. That is based on diversity, how different we each are. And our goal is to be more present with diversity, to acknowledge it, to embrace it, and to not be afraid of it. And then we come to inclusion. And when we have a recognition of diversity and we add in those supports through equity, we get to a space of inclusion. And this is where we create a genuine sense of belonging and value. And that's not just in council chambers, but that should spread throughout our entire community. So what I'm proposing today is something called working title in Wolfville. So in being short for inclusion. And so in Wolfville is really an intentional approach. And I keep going back to this because council has been intentional about getting to this point. The community has been intentional about saying, we need this. This is not accidental. We're not doing this for any other reason except this is really where our hearts and spirits are. So this is an intentional approach to recognizing and acknowledging the diversity of our community members while developing new barrier-free programs to help residents build more meaningful connections. So that's pretty broad, and then we'll start to pull it apart. My pitch to council, why you might want to support this program, besides the fact that you put $10,000 into the budget, which is kind of, this is now what we're going to do with it. But if we really start to support this program, and again, this is kind of the very early stages of this, and this will grow from year to year. But when we support this program and programs like this, we will across the community increase feelings of inclusion, and feelings are the important part. It really has to be felt for it to work. So we're going to increase feelings of inclusion. We are all going to increase awareness of barriers, because we can't remove barriers unless we're aware of them. And we want to increase the creation of meaningful connections within our town. And that's not just people to people, but it's people to programs, people to services. So the inspiration for this program, and I'm sorry that Tom V had to leave, but the inspiration to this came out of the feedback that was provided by the community during our initial exploration of this, that was happening in early 2023. So if we think back to last December, right before we went on break, council had motioned for staff to go out to the community. We had a very short period of time to go out and ask some questions, get in front of some different groups, and really see what folks in the community wanted. And the reason why that kind of engagement is so critically important is because, as we all know, there is no other community anywhere in the world like Wolfville for so many different reasons, not just town and gown, but our physical location, our history, and all the things we're working towards in the future. So Tom V is in this picture because she was brought in as a short-term consultant to assist with this project. She helped make a lot of connections, and she helped with all of the conversations. And then we brought a report back to council in April of 23, which kind of had a long list of feedback and items suggested by the community. So from all of those pieces and all of that feedback, I started having conversations with consultants, with experts in the field, with community partners, community members. And so it all kind of started to come together. And so again, what I'm proposing to you today is the first step of this work. So we're really looking at how do we tap into the funding that council put aside, which is $10,000, and how do we get this started? So think of this as the first approach that we will be doing kind of before the end of this fiscal, and then obviously go forward. We'll see where we're getting some traction, and then council will have the ability to hopefully put more budget forward when Mike takes us through that joyful process. So the three pieces which kind of cover off some of the big items that we heard. The first piece is internally working. So doing some assessment, something called a cultural competency assessment. I had to really work on enunciating that. So this is an assessment that is done online. A number of different consultants are offering it. And we would be inviting members of council if they're interested, and members of the senior management team and some other staff as well to complete this assessment. It's private, it's personal. And what it does is it really gives us a sense of where we are, where our understanding is, and where the gaps are. This is something that I really look forward to doing. My gaps are massive in knowledge. And so it's kind of it's a humbling process to go through, but it's also exciting because unless we start to understand where those knowledge gaps are and where we might be uncomfortable, we really can't get more comfortable. So once the assessments are done, then the consultant will be doing one-on-one debriefs with folks, going through the results, saying, here's what the assessment showed. And then kind of the consultant with that overall knowledge will be able to come back and say, okay, based on kind of the broad strokes here of where folks are, here are some pieces that you might want to look at for internal training, workshops, things like that. So we all want training. Everybody really expressed a desire and an interest to learn more and to go further, but it's hard to understand where to start unless we really know where kind of each of us are. So that's the internal assessment and support piece that we would be starting with. The price tag for that to get the cultural competency assessments done, we would be looking at approximately $2,000 and getting that sense of where we go next. So the second piece, and some of you might harken back to when this was actually up and running in the town, but we're looking at breathing some life back into a host family program. So a lot of the feedback that we got from going out and having conversations through the engagement cycle had to do with the unique dynamic of our town. At any point in time, we have just under 1,000 international students connected to this community through Acadia. Those are students who we want to have an amazing experience. As with all students, we want them to stay here. And it ties into provincial goals and federal goals of helping to keep folks in Canada longer. So if we can build meaningful, lasting relationships, starting when people arrive at Acadia, there is a better opportunity to provide that really meaningful experience. So a host family program would involve people who I would think of as community ambassadors, people who want to build a relationship with an international student, act as a guide, act as a mentor, act as a support, answering questions, participating in recreational activities, kind of across the board, just developing a really good relationship, especially considering that our international students are away from home, away from family, away from traditions, and away from community that's known to them. So how we would approach this, the first phase would be working with the Wong Center. They would be helping to connect us with an international student who would work closely with us in a very rapid period of time to basically come up with a map, a feasibility study, and to be able to come forward and say, okay, here's what the program looks like. Here's what the program would cost. Here's who should support the program. Here is the ideal kind of volunteer who would participate. Here's how we will match those volunteers with students. Here are some activities that people can go and do together, but really kind of mapping that out so that by the time we do start to do enrollment for the program, we know what it's going to look like and we can kind of answer some of those bigger questions. So we've had conversations with the Wong Center. They're really excited about this. It would be a town-led program with supports strategically from the Wong Center and from Acadia, but it would be a town program. And so we're looking at for the feasibility study, which would really be to bring a student on, an international student to do this work. We're looking at about $3,000 to get that mapped out. The third part of this program, and this is one that some of you have probably heard about. Some of our staff have worked on an early kind of pilot of this program. One of our previous co-op students has worked on the pilot for this, but it's working, the working title is the Wolfville Soup Program. And this is, in my mind, it's a congregate dining program, and it's being run in partnership with the Wolfville Farmers Market. This is a program that will be offering initially monthly, but then going to a weekly community supper. This is food that is locally sourced, will be locally produced, where people will go to the market. It's a pay what you can format. So again, we're breaking down those barriers and really allowing people to come together to enjoy a meal, to enjoy conversation, to build relationships. And it's a dignified way of addressing food insecurity, because it doesn't matter if you're wealthy. It doesn't matter if you've got some financial barriers that you're facing. It is a pay what you can. And it's a really healthy, vibrant way to come together and to really kind of spark conversation and build our community using food as kind of that starting point. The other reason that I really like the soup program is because it then creates a location where our host family program can be going on a regular basis. And I think we can all think of times where we've had great conversations and built great relationships, you know, out and about having wonderful meals. And so it's so nice to be able to do that in a way where we don't have those financial barriers, where everybody can feel equal. So again, with the host family program, it doesn't mean that the ambassador from the town always has to be the one paying the bill. Everybody can access it because it's pay what you can. So through these three pieces, we're looking at our internal capacity, building our awareness, and really growing our internal resources. We will be looking at specifically supporting our international student population, because we've heard time and time again that is that's an area we need to focus on. And then we're also starting to tap into feelings of loneliness and food insecurity and getting people healthy meals. And all of that is building this sense of inclusion. So just a reminder about why we want to do this work. And when we use equity, diversity, and inclusion as a framework, people will start to feel safer, more respected, more engaged, more connected. Everything gets better in a community where we can focus on this. And when we start to use this as a lens and kind of apply everything we do through this lens, and look at it through that lens, it means that this really does start to guide our actions and our reactions. So, you know, Mayor Donovan was making comments earlier. The mindset is there. We're already aware. We've been hearing, you know, things that have been reported back to us. So we're already looking at ways to connect those dots. It's not just through this one program, but it will spread into everything that we're doing. So I'm happy to take your questions.
Councillor Ingham.
Thank you, Barb. I'm so excited to hear all this. And what I'm really excited when I'm hearing your voice is all the meaningful and tangible aspects that are actually in this plan. As we talked about it before, we didn't know where we were going. We're talking about spending money on posters and everything, and it wasn't meaningful. It wasn't tangible. So this is like a really, really good start. And there is no better way to bring people together than food. I do want to mention that Acadia also does have a soup program. It's, I think, on Thursdays from 5 until 6 that it's put on by the counseling center and also the chapel. So they have a little bit of that. Yeah, so if there's any way we can work together, it's for students, but I'm sure anybody could kind of drop in. I don't know how it's working. I think it starts up again this week. So that's something you might want to look at. Also, I'm just wondering, as we at the last meeting at diversity, it was brought to my attention that, and I didn't know this because that as we similarly, the town put in an accessibility plan to the province, we now need an EDI plan to the province. Would this be submitted to the province? Is this part of what we're looking at moving forward to submit? And when would that have to be submitted? Am I talking off base or, but that's what we did talk about that. So this is coming to the forefront in the province to have the anti-racism charter and follow a plan on that. So that would be something that you would be working on also.
So I can give a little bit of an update on that. So the province, and I've noted both of those pieces in the request for decision that's before you. So the province has their Dismantling Racism and Hate Act, and then they've got their Equity and Anti-Racism Strategy. Just as towns, villages, municipalities were prescribed under the Accessibility Act, we are expecting to be prescribed under these pieces of legislation. It hasn't happened yet, but the province has been doing some info sessions, which I've been attending. And we've been starting to receive that feedback that we should get ready to start developing plans. In those training sessions and those kind of info sessions, for folks who have already kind of started on this journey, there seems to be a real level of support from the province that, you know, if we've created something that works for our community and is based on the needs of the community, as this is, because this is what the community fed back to us through that engagement, that this is a really good way to start with that. I do expect we will need fulsome plans developed. That timeline's still unclear. Yeah. But so this is still a start. And then it will kind of start to go forward. We've also had the feedback that we will be able to partner with other organizations on this. So potentially we could be partnering with Acadia as well.
I could just ask one follow-up to that. So I really love the way that we're working with Acadia, and I love that host program. I think we talked about that 2 years ago. Councillor Elliott and I are both talking about it, and everybody else was also, but I remember specifically Councillor Elliott brought it up. As working with the Wong Center, is there any way like, and I think you've done a wonderful job on our Facebook and website page to sort of include everything. I think we had a really successful Pride Month here. There was so many, there's so many events that were going on. People were talking about them actually outside of Wolfville, saying, oh, Wolfville really did that month up. But there's also other things that we can focus on too. Would it be cognizant to maybe even at Acadia, like with the Wong Center, sort of have a focus group and we can go through maybe a calendar that we feel what are the meaningful observances in this town? Because as you know, we have about 100 different cultures and diversity in this province. So would that be something we could look at, you know, as we're working with the Wong International Center?
Yeah, and a little bit of that already happened through our engagement cycle, not specifically through the Wong Center per se, but a lot of the feedback that we received, because we did go out to the community and say, you know, what do you want? What do you want acknowledged or recognized or celebrated? And the feedback was really interesting because for the most part, people weren't saying the town has to do these things. There was more of a sense of provide support to folks in the community who are already doing that well. Within the Wong Center, a lot of their programming comes from international students who are celebrating and sharing aspects of their own culture. So in that case, some of what we've heard is, can we provide folks with space, either free or affordable space, so that I remember when Tom V was working with the center last year, they wanted to do a celebration of Holi, which is one of the festivals. And so they wanted a space to do it. And they ended up, I think, using the Lions Hall. But it's really that sense of how can we support in that way, as opposed to the town's not going to run something of that nature. Pride and the Pride Picnic was a great example of that as well. Obviously, really important for us to do that. And we partnered with Valley Pride because they are the experts. It's for the same reason that we continue to partner with the community oven. They are so ahead of so many others in how they do acknowledge those different cultural ceremonies and celebrations. I will also say that part of the events work will fall to Nick, and there is some money in the budget that Nick works with, which is how we provided some supports to the Pride Picnic. And I believe that for Truth and Reconciliation, the Evans taking the lead on that. And again, we'll get that information to council once we have it. So absolutely things need to be acknowledged and celebrated. It's just a matter of who's going to lead that and how can we be supportive to ensure that it happens.
Who was first?
I
Councillor,
know I was last.
you were last. All right, I was gonna let you go first. Jody, Councillor McKay.
On the first bullet that you had up was on the consultant doing that, you know, the work with us to figure out what where gaps were. So that is wonderful. I think that's a good starting point. When we do that, so that will be integrated into HR as part of an onboarding. So when every new person gets hired, do they get the same training? And when counselors come on at the flip of every election, that will be done as an onboarding part of that thing? Like, that's what I'm wondering.
So I think, and that's not covered in this initial, like,
Okay.
just for the rest of this fiscal.
Okay.
But that would be something really meaningful to consider at budget time. And as HR policies are being reviewed and other policies are being reviewed, that's definitely something to think about bringing forward. It might also be helpful for members of council to go through the cultural competency assessment and figure out, is it meaningful? Is that something you would recommend to others? Or is there something else that might be more supportive?
Right. I assumed we would do that as part of that as well, because I think that's would be important. So if it was something, yeah, thank you. I'll put that on my list. The Wong Center, I think I love that. I think to Councillor Ingham's point is when we get those connections built, I think those observation dates and things will naturally and just sort of become part of our way because we'll build something there. I too have been in contact with them to see if they can come and present at the WBDC, just get them more included in that as well, to see if there are products and other things that we've learned about over the time that they were missing, just to get again another level of inclusion. So that would be great. With Councillor Ingham again, food, there's no better way to bring people together. And conversations just happen. So I think that will be great. And the community oven does a great job of that as well. So, having all of those things come together, I think more will come out of it organically than we expect, which is, I think, just the nicest form of inclusion. Yeah, thank you. I love it.
Councillor Elliott?
Thank you. So yeah, 3 great initiatives for sure, for sure. I was interested personally because of the host family notion coming back around. And I'm going to get you a contact for a retired Acadia staff person from the Wong Center who I think could be a really good resource. And I'm
wondering if she's already provided feedback on.
Well, I don't know.
Names start with J?
Yeah.
Yeah, done. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she really helped form a lot of this. So
Yeah, but I at the same time, we were really sad when we were told that the students weren't interested in the host family program anymore, because we'd hosted at least 6 and found it really rewarding. So it does have to be a two-way street. And I too wanted to mention the community oven because I tend to hang out there because my husband's volunteering. And last week, there was a Ukrainian day. Borscht was made. There were lots of people there. I've talked to students from Nepal who don't know anything about this town or anything in North America, and it's just fascinating. So yeah, you're so right about food is that open door. So carry on.
Councillor Butler?
Just a couple of things. Thanks. This was awesome. This was awesome. Does soup stand for something?
as I was driving in this morning, I asked myself the same
It was always so
question.
bolded, and I'm like, it doesn't
Yeah,
say any-
There is an organization already in the area, Save Our Ugly Produce, and I will mention it.
Oh.
It's already exists to do that. So I will talk to
Okay.
it
And,
afterwards.
and I will have to report back on that. We have kind of our first meeting in the next couple of weeks to kind of learn more about the program. But that was the name that was being used during the pilot. It probably does stand for something. I
Okay.
just don't know what, and I can't get past the notion of delicious soup. So.
Okay. The one question I had about the soup program is because it says the Wolfville Farmers Market has hired a part-time staff person to oversee this new offering. Is that they have already hired someone and they were going to do this program and now it's something that the town can get involved in, or the town presented it, the market said, yes, we will
Market
hire
said it,
someone
right.
to help out. I was just worried, I not worried. I didn't know the timing of that or the timeline of that.
Yeah, so the kind of backstory on that is that Kelly Marie had reached out for financial support from the town specifically for this program. It was after, it was right after budget. So it was a little bit past when we had any wiggle room and a lot of the other kind of funding pots that we would normally draw from, they were empty.
Okay.
So we started having conversations about what was possible. In the interim, the market went ahead and acknowledged that there was such a need for a program of this nature. Some Acadia students had done a pilot last year. It was very successful. And so the market went ahead and just said, we have to do this. We have to find a way to make this work. The community needs it. And then I just kept saying, we'll do our best to build support with council and to go through, of course, our process. Sometimes we take a little bit longer, but yeah, Sophia has been hired. She's already working at the market, and she will be overseeing this program. Yeah.
Okay.
Some of you have already had the pleasure of
Yeah.
meeting her. It'd be nice to have her come in and do a little bit of an update at some point. So the program is happening. It will happen with or without town support, but it's such an integral part, I think, of what we want to really achieve
Yeah.
that I'm hoping the support is there too. And part of why I'm here is basically ensuring that council is aware that the budget funds that you put aside would be leveraged to go to that program through the market.
And that's what I was hoping. So I sort of saw, as soon as I read that, I thought, well, I know the community oven does something. I know that if once Devour is up and running, they might have something. So I almost see this as every night of the week, somewhere in Wolfville, there will be some sort of community something happening. So then you're now touring the town. You know, this night's soup kitchen's at Devour. This one's at the farmer's market. This one's at the Baptist church. This one's at. It was really wonderful to read that. The one thing I love most about this entire thing is that we as council and staff are included in all three components. I loved the welcome week, going to that, being identified as someone who is in the town and can be a face that you're going to see and you can approach. It was hard to miss us, but that was wonderful. I did not. I liked it for the sake that they did identify us as you're in that hat for a reason. New students could see, I see more in that hat. So they knew that, I don't want to say we were important, we are important, but we have a role. They could come and approach us, ask a question, where's this, where's that? And that hat sort of told them they know something about this town. So each of these components made me feel like I can go to that and I can go to that and I can go to that and be a representative and be really involved. So I loved that about those three components. So thank you. That was my last comment.
I do see your light, Isabel, but I wanted to build on. So there is an organization and that's what it stands for, Save Our Ugly Produce. And it came out of the market and it may be the same thing. And it was started by Lindsay, whose name I can't remember. There are gleaners, so they go out and glean in the fields and they get this produce. But the reason I say it's financed, always was, by Rotary. So when you're looking for how things like this, then I encourage you to submit an application to Mud Creek, because that is how the soup program is funded and a lot of things at the market. So in case that communication hadn't happened. Isabel. Deputy Mayor.
So I'm not going to repeat everything everyone's already said, but I just have a question around in Wolfville, IN. What is it? Because I looked at that and I thought, well, WBDC had the win in Wolfville, and I thought it might be a bit confusing. So I'm just curious why you came up with in Wolfville.
And
It's totally confusing.
There's an in Wolfville, yes.
It's an in.
Yeah, so I just wanted to have a little bit of a working title besides EDI proposed project. And to me, this is all about inclusion. Over and over again, when we did engagement, we kept hearing inclusion was really that kind of goal that everybody wanted to see achieved, so that people would feel that they were part of something. So it was just that play on word, short for inclusion, and you're in Wolfville, which means you belong in Wolfville and all of those things. But yeah, obviously the whole program needs to be further branded. I'm just not there yet. So I'm open to suggestions. Might be a good thing to talk about at one of the soup nights.
Or maybe the WBDC can change their small in to a big in. And it can be inclusion as in when in Wolfville, and we can work it together and they can put a really good spin on it.
Yeah.
Because they are very good marketers. Well, better than I, let's say.
Tina came up with that one 2 years, but they've changed it. We knew where.
It was a competition.
Yeah.
Other comment? Thank you. There's a motion. Sorry. My deputy mayor is snoozing.
What? I was just giving the
Wait,
motion.
okay. He got you first. We have a motion.
Yeah, no, it's right here.
Who would like to move the motion?
I'll end up seconding it. She go right ahead.
Well, you haven't moved one yet.
Okay.
so-
I will gladly move this. I move that committee of the whole forward the following motion to council for decision, that council supports the development and launch of the In Wolfville program as the first steps of our town's equity, diversity, and inclusion approach.
All those in favor?
Need a
I'm
second?
sorry, we seconded, Deputy Mayor will second it. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. I obviously need some food in my brain. So we are adjourned for, can we say half an hour? I understand food should have arrived by now. Okay, I will be. All right. Let's,
I think they were just gonna break and come back to finish up committee of the whole, like it wasn't.
no, we'll definitely finish committee of the whole, but if we want to do it, I'm good. But Isabel will keep me on track. I am really, my blood sugar's gone. Soup, no, I need food. All right. Let's go ahead with, let me just turn that, the operating line of credit and Valley Waste Resource. Thank you.
Okay, the operating line of credit, we bring it annually at this time. It relates to just ensuring that we have adequate access to funds through our banking institution. The only change this year is the limit related to the water utility, and I've provided some page references to the year-end audited statements just to indicate the why. We're still awaiting the rate decision from the UARB, so I'll leave it to any questions. The dollar amounts are reasonable, and they allow us to just always ensure we have cash flow if and when needed.
Councillor Butler, why don't you put that on the floor and then we'll second it and get any questions.
Okay. I move that committee of the whole forward the following motion to council for decision, that council approves the following lines of credit with the Bank of Montreal effective October 1st, 2023 to September 30th, 2024. Town operating fund bank account, $700,000 maximum credit. Water utility operating fund bank account, $285,000 maximum credit. Corporate credit cards, $50,000 maximum credit, all cards combined.
Thank you. Seconder, please. Councillor Elliott, any questions of the Director of Finance? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, that passes. And then go ahead, Mike.
The second item before you, RFD, is the reoccurring debt guarantees for Valley Waste, the timing of which is always time sensitive.
Jody.
So I think the information's in the report. It's our percentage share of our intermunicipal service agreement. So I'll leave it to the motion and any questions if they come up.
I'm going to ask Councillor McKay as the alternate on the IMSA to move that motion.
Certainly. I would move that committee of the whole forward the following motion to council for decision. That council guarantees a share of the Valley Waste Resource Management Authority's TBR capital for the fiscal year 2023-24 in the amount of $553,000, with Wolfville's share being 9.85% or $54,471 as per attached partner guarantee resolution form.
The seconder, please.
second that.
Councillor Butler. Any questions? Comments? Yes, Councillor Commodore.
Sure, thank you. Mike, what was our share last year? Was it 9.85% or is that what it always is?
No, I believe it was, and I stand to be corrected. I think it was around 8.6 or 8.7%. It's a combination of the uniform assessment each year and population data. Our uniform assessment share bumped us up a bit.
Councillor Elliott.
That was basically. It seemed like a much larger amount. I remember from when I was on.
We're growing. Councillor Butler, did you have a question? Other questions? Okay, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? And that's passed. I would note that the next item is being is removed from today. It's going to go directly to council. We do have an in camera when we come back. Do we want to just let's do that because I expect we can do this in a moment. So if we move to committee reports, Councillor Butler, anything else to add on Kings Point to Point?
There was a lot of meetings and no, everything's good.
Councillor McKay, No,
And to add.
and I have nothing to add on the IMSA agreement. There is a meeting coming up this week. Councillor McKay will be next week taking it because I will be away. There's nobody for public input, so now I would suggest we adjourn and then we will come back to in camera. In which case we don't need to bring Zoom back on. Correct? So a motion.
So moved. I moved to adjourn.
So we, no, we're not adjourning. Do we, a motion just to adjourn to in camera, or do we just have our? Okay, we're just taking a break, and when we come